Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. Welcome to the Bedminster Township Committee. This is our regularly scheduled meeting for September 16, 2024. Recognize that we have a full attendance by the Township Committee here in person. Committeeman Stevenson, Committeeman Hickey, Committeewoman Moreski, and Committeewoman Hernandez. Ms. Ray, may we please have the Open Public Meetings Act statement?
Yes, Mayor. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Township Committee was sent to the Courier News Somerville, Bernardsville News Whippany, and to all subscribers and posted at the Township Municipal Building on January 5th, 2024.
Great. Thank you. Would you please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have some special guests today, and we'll be here getting a presentation from our liaisons from JCP&L regarding outages and reliability of the system. However, before we get to the JCP&L presentation, we do have the opportunity for public comments not related to JCP&L. So any member of the public wishing to make a statement, now's your opportunity to do so. If you're here in person, you can raise your hand and we'll recognize you and pull you up to the podium. If you are participating remotely and you're on Zoom, take your cursor, go down to the bottom, click on reactions, click on raise hand, and Ms. Ray will put you into queue for public comment. Once again, public comment not related to the JCP&L presentation.
So far, I'm not seeing any public comment, but there's a couple more people adding. So if you give me one moment, Mayor. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands for public comment, Mayor.
Okay, so we will close public comment and we will go straight into the JCP&L presentation. So I'm not sure who we have. So I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves.
Certainly. All right, all good. You can hear me coming through? Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Jackie Espinoza. I'm the Manager of External Affairs. And thank you for having us tonight. And we have a lot of good stories to tell you. And with me here today, I have Bob Flynn. He's the Regional External Affairs Consultant in JCP&L territory, and he covers Bedminster. And with us here tonight, we have Sean Hayes, who's the Manager of Reliability Engineering. And you'll see in the presentation, Sean is very passionate and dedicated to improve the customer experience at JCP&L. And he even goes down to the minute of interruption. And he has a great team. You know, that's their job to do. And he has challenged them to improve this customer experience. But with all due, I'll turn it over to you, Bob, to start the presentation. And we're going to go over a nice overview for Bedminster. Thank you.
Bob, give me.
Hi.
We have people that are joining, so just give me one moment.
Sure.
Okay.
So Robin, please
I
mute
have to mute-
everyone.
everybody
and-
who's muted is coming on. I'm just trying to make sure I have everybody completely muted. So give me one moment. The 908-304-4713, is that any of you? Okay. Sorry, we have 2 pages of stuff to go through here, so give me one moment. Okay, so Bob, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to share your screen, so I'm going to make you a co-host, okay?
Sure.
Okay. You should be okay.
I think I'm in. Let me just move this around. All right, so good evening, everybody. Again, as Jackie had mentioned, my name is Bob Flynn. I am covering currently the Summit Line District, which covers Bedminster. Had it for 3 months now, I believe. But primarily my territory is up north in Morris and Passaic County in our boot and line shop. I am familiar with the towns down here. However, yeah, it's only been a few months, so I'm kind of still learning everything in terms of the geographical and circuit information, substation information, but we're going to jump right in here today. So you can see my screen, right, Robin?
I can. I'm going to close this side panel out. I just want to make sure that everybody's muted before we get into your presentation.
I know.
Besides you. So give me one last pass since I just added several people.
Okay, is that better? Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Okay. So the first few slides here, we're going to give you a picture in terms of the circuit layout. I think just from speaking with a reliability engineer, we've done a few of these presentations. So I think you guys are probably a little bit more familiar than some other towns in terms of your circuit information. But this is the layout that we have here. You can see we have 4 substations. The Somerset substation, Chambersbrook, as well as actually, I think all 4 of these in some way feed the Hills section of town. But I know that is where we're going to focus towards the end of the presentation because we've obviously received a lot of inquiries in that area, and we've had a very challenging summer, is the way I'd put it. We had, oh boy, I think it was maybe 10 weekends in a row that we were working in our external affairs department. We had high humidity, obviously, since May. We've had storms every week. Tropical storm came through as well. And a number of, even on blue sky days or sunny, hot, humid days, we had ash fall in my territory, and including down here, down in Summit. So it's been a very challenging summer. The data you'll see that we'll go over in terms of our CMI, which is customer minutes interrupted. You can see the indication of we've had, a peak during Isaias. That was a big year in terms of reliability, kind of a lull, some calmer temperatures, better weather, and things have kind of ramped up again this summer. So it's had its challenges. But as Jackie said, Sean's group, the reliability engineers, are constantly looking at this data. There's no incentive for us to keep a meter not spinning longer than it has to. We've had a lot of challenges this year between the high heat and the weather. But this is the circuit configuration in terms of Bedminster. Black outline is obviously the municipality. The colored circuits tie in with the arrows that are pointed to them. But that is the circuit designed for Bedminster. Circuit to the Hills, you can see here, we have actually 5 substations that feed the Hills area. So PPAC up in the northern section, the western in Greater Crossroads, southwestern Chamberbrook, southeastern Somerset, and eastern Dead River. Again, I hope I have that geographically correct, but this is the layout for the Hills. I know we have a large customer base in that section. They have had their share of reliability issues this summer. So,
and Bob, just to
Yes.
confirm that the geography of those substations is not necessarily related to the geography of the service, especially within the Hills. So the PPAC substation, which is the northernmost, feeds sections of the Hills,
right.
where there are intervening feeds from other substations.
Correct. So typically, yeah, you would, and that would kind of tie into probably some of the constituent inquiries that you have. There's different interruption frequencies, there's different outage profiles that each of these different circuits have. There are equipment on them and things like that we can manipulate, whether it be remotely or out in the field, but it does present its challenges, and it is a pretty extensive area that we have to cover in that section. So that's why there's those in terms of capacity and things like that, why we put customers on either different phases, different circuits, substations. It's all to prevent a load imbalance, where if you have a load imbalance, you could see, problems like low voltage or things like that. So this is all done lots of engineering, lots of math that goes into this. But this is the current design for the hills that we have here. So next is in terms of the substation and circuit information, the customer counts are on the right-hand side. I don't have to read each one there, but you can see 1200 Chambersbrook, 19, it's Greater Crossroads is probably, I think, our biggest, the 94. And then smaller circuits like the 95 have 127 customers, the 00 has 48 out of Somerset. But this is the customer count in those in the municipality that we have that covers Bedminster. So this data, this is what I was mentioning before. This is the non-storm outage analysis that my reliability engineer compiled over the last 4 years. So obviously I misspoke, I think before 2019 was Isaias. You can see that in terms of our distribution, substation, transmission, subtransmission, I'll kind of break that down a little bit is the best way to understand it, distribution circuits are the ones that run along the main streets. Different for 206 because 206 has subtransmission and distribution, but easiest way to spot a transmission pole,
Nope.
about 90 feet, 85 feet.
Oh.
Our distribution poles are somewhere around 45 to 55, I think, isn't that correct there? So we've had, as you can see in 2019, a number of outages that were due on our distribution circuit to Isaias. 2021, we had a difficult year as well. I can't remember if there was a named storm in 2021 that caused our outages. And then obviously you can see, if you look past Chambersbrook, Greater Crossroads, you can see that our biggest years since then have been this year, 2024 and 2020.
And Bob, what's that pie chart on the right showing? Sorry, my eyes are not that good anymore.
Oh, no problem. So the light blue is subtransmission. Dark blue is distribution. Subtransmission is anything below 34 or anything above 34.5, correct?
So yeah, subtransmission would be anything about 34.5 kV in our distribution system. Typically, why that's important to understand is that typically subtransmission or subtransmission poles apparently are more reliable than distribution poles. They're less susceptible to weather, carpal accidents, things like that.
Higher clearance too for vegetation management as well. But subtransmission, back to your question, Kevin, was that's the voltage, and it is when we say things like transmission trips or things like that, that's what we're referring to as subtransmission activity. I know down in the Summit Line shop area, which covers Bedminster, I had a ton from the summer of lightning strikes in the transmission corridor. It was a huge cause, I know, for a number of my towns for transmission trips. A lot of lightning activity this summer. In a unique kind of weather pattern that it was going from what normally is west to east, it was kind of taking a southeasterly direction. Most storms were coming off Canada down the jet stream through New Jersey. I'm a bit of a weather nut, so it kind of benefits being in this position, but yeah, unique summer. And then this is the breakdown in terms of causes. So we have, again, the numbers are the customer minutes of customer minute interruptions that we have. Obviously it's obvious that we have a lot of these that are due to tree related outages. There are forced outages in there, equipment failure, and unknown. The difficult part I have with those numbers in terms of equipment failure and unknown is that when the troubleshooter is going out to the scene, obviously, the first priority is safety. That's number one. We want to make sure that lineman makes it home to his family. The second is to do their data analysis to find what the issue is, isolate the fault if able, and get those customers back online. They do have the at the end of the order, customers are restored, the job is finished, they have to categorize what the outage is. If they can't find the dead squirrel that blew up next to the pole, or, the tree branch hit it, bounced 10 feet into the woods, they can't directly associate that with the cause. We have to label these unknown or equipment failure. So I take those numbers a little bit with a grain of salt, because again, during high storm activity, those troubleshooters are just trying to get to the next job and get those customers back in lights. So they are not spending 15 minutes looking with a flashlight of, oh, it was a tree. Oh, it was, this or that. Obvious ones are like carpole accidents, or if we have a full tree, take, 2 spans of wire, breaks 4 poles. Those are easy causes we can determine. Some of the others get labeled these categories, which is why you see those numbers have an increase as we get into greater crossroads in the P-PAC. So.
And Bob, just a quick question. Is there a threshold outage that goes into this analysis? In other words, are you capturing everything above 5 minutes, everything above 4 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds? What's your basis for determining a monitored outage?
So BPU requires us for any 5-minute outage to record. Anything beneath that, we label as a blip or a transmission trip. So a number of those sub-transmissions were under that 5-minute, and typically that's due to the equipment that's at the substation or in proximity, close proximity to the lockout zone to the substation, that we have the ability to do what's called switching. We can do it with distribution as well, but transmission has the ability to alternate feeds for a substation if we have a fault, or if we had a lightning strike or, a fall inside the transmission corridor. They have that ability to do that switching real time, extremely quickly. And typically, the ones that I see, again, not during a major storm, are usually about a minute or so, maybe 2.
So anything less than 5 minutes is gonna be considered what we call momentary. Anything 5 minutes or greater is gonna be what we call a sustained outage. And that'll be important to understand the definition as we go into some of the solutions for your reliability issues.
So and I know when we get to the reliability discussion, we'll get into this a little bit deeper. So BPU requires counting those outages 5 minutes and over, but do you keep track? Not you, but does JCP&L keep track of those 5 minutes and under?
So the momentary outages, we do to an extent, because it's important for us to understand the number of operations something would have operated out in the field. Or within that 5 minutes period, it really, we really want our technology to operate, which means, like, you'll hear me talk about distribution automation and things like that. And it's basically the circuit's ability to detect the dead parts of the circuit and then make some switching changes to affect less than 5 minutes, pick up customers. So for instance, a tree falls outside of your house. We're never going to sit here and tell you that you're not going to get power outages. We probably will. But we want these sectionalization devices to limit the amount of customers that will experience that outage. So everyone else in the non-vicinity will experience what we call the momentary, less than 5 minutes. The equipment on the line does its job cascadingly. And then the customers then that are unfortunately in that district where the tree fell will have an outage until the trees repaired. Or not the trees repaired, but the infrastructure is repaired.
Yeah, and they're seeing that damage real time, so it's no surprise to them that 20,000-pound oak is causing their outage, but the person 5 miles down the circuit will feel that for potentially, as Sean said, a minute or 2. But the data also, I would say, is Sean compiles that. We keep that data as our customer history. It goes into our investment and things like that in terms of like worst performing circuits. That's data we compile. I am, as well as I think you are, Sean, as well. We're both on worst performing circuits right now. I am the last house on my circuit in Chester, and it runs through a ton of trees on private property. And I've had a number of issues this summer just due to those tree damage situations. And you're on one as well, but not because we work for the company, because we're on a circuit that has had a lot of issues in terms of reliability. So that data is constantly moving. There's constantly circuits being added to that, taken off after we make improvements or infrastructure upgrades, et cetera.
Okay, so just to be clear, so the momentary outages are considered when you're identifying worst performing lines? No, they're not considered.
And really quick, when you get those trips, the equipment is operating. Like years ago, if we didn't have a recloser on the system, you would have had an outage, a truck would have had to come out, reclose the fuse. But now you have these automatic devices that can detect and they'll put it back. So you're having a much shortened outage, you have momentaries instead of, so that's, we have this more advanced equipment on the system. So you don't have long duration outages.
I'm sure you're going to hear plenty from some of our residents who experienced blue sky, those momentary outages where we certainly were not aware of larger outages elsewhere in the region and certainly in the service area. But you know what?
Yep.
I think our residents will will be primed to talk about that in a few minutes.
We welcome that, because, again, we want to hear the feedback from the customer experience perspective.
Oh,
you will.
Don't you worry.
We've been out.
You will.
A few of these guys, so, basically, what we want to do with that, and really, we really want to focus on the customer experience. So, when we talk about momentaries, right? Is it normal to have a momentary every once in a while? Of course it is. I mean, we live in an environment, and especially in an area where people hit holes. I mean, the big failures do happen. But if you have a momentary, you're just getting a blue sky days for no apparent reason or whatnot, we do need to know about that stuff, because perhaps it's not being captured in our systems, or perhaps it's something that we need to investigate. So we do appreciate the feedback. It's not, we do want to, again, like Bob said, we have a lot of motivation to keep your meters spinning. So that's the main goal, is to not have the meters not spin for a long period of time.
And Sean, just so I understand, so even though the momentaries are not going to the BPU, you're looking at them from a reliability standpoint.
When we see them, they're not tracked the same way. It's sometimes difficult for us to see them. There's several main mechanisms which we kind of roll data and clump data together, customer input, we have the apps, people call, operation or SCADA controlled devices on the line that have visibility to when outages are, will also give us feedback. And then obviously the boots on the ground. So, sometimes, when it comes for like the customer perspective, people are frustrated, they decide not to tell us when, like, hey, I just had like 5 momentaries within the last hour. Okay, well, something like that might not have been captured because A, not enough calls were generated, or B, there was no troubleshooter went out there to see that, there was something going on with galloping lines or something unusual. So it's not to say that we captured everything, but we're interested in everything in all aspects, even to the momentaries. We want to make improvements where we can. I've heard some pretty weird stuff with what's going on with some of the infrastructure, between animal guarding, galloping wires, transient faults, twigs that are caught up in the wires in places. And, a lot of the times it's the customers who point that stuff out to us. We were able to go out and address it.
Okay, so I may, if you're comfortable, I may pivot to you for these two.
I mean, just keep talking.
Yeah.
I'm coming off the tail end of a cold. My kid's been in school for 3 weeks already. It's like, it happened pretty quick, I guess, but. So this slide here, this is a couple of different projects or upgrades that we kind of have in the works, or I would say in the vicinity, which will help reliability in this area. Bedminster, but we also have a focus on the hills on the next slide, I think.
Yeah.
So basically what we've noticed is, on a couple of these different circuits, we've had 7+ outages in the last 12 months. Some of these concepts or some of these, reliability performance on a circuit will cause it to end up on what we call our highest priority circuit list. And, out of all the circuits in Jersey, there has to be a couple of metrics that it meets. We track, the frequency of the outages that customers experience the best we can. And we also look at the duration of the outages that the customers are experiencing. And obviously we want to keep the frequencies and the durations down where we can. So in some of these circuits, we've had, 7+ outages in the last 12 months. You guys have seen the customer minutes of interruption on the last couple of slides. And just, to level set where that is, when you see 9 million on a circuit per year, that's a lot. I mean, so that's elevated. When we see, a couple 100,000 of customer minutes, I mean, we could have had a couple smaller outages with longer durations, or we could have had frequent outages, that happen in different areas of the circuit for, all year long. So our reliability engineers have to do a pretty good job at analyzing each circuit. And we usually do that based off of the 5-year average. And so what we've done is we've actually put together a couple of projects in and around this area. We're dumping about $800,000 on a project on an adjacent circuit to strengthen the circuit in terms of tying it, upgrading the infrastructure, because we're looking for abilities to pick up the circuits and backfeed the circuits where possible. At First Energy in general, but JCP&L kind of led the charge a little bit, is we want to develop a standard for overhead circuits, and we're calling it our circuit of the future. And what that really entails is increased sectionalization and protective devices. So, again, we sectionalize circuits, and when we do that, we can create what we call premier operating districts or pods. And the idea of a pod is exactly what I was talking about, previously, where I can't sit here and tell you that if a tree falls outside of your home, unfortunately, it's going to happen, and your power will probably go out. And unfortunately for you, if it's your trees, you're going to bring your neighbor's power out too, probably. what we are trying to do is make it so that if a tree falls down the line, 5 miles down the line, we shouldn't see the outage, right? That's what we're going, that's what we're trying to strive for. And in time, we're going to get there where we can, right? So spending this $800,000 and to strengthen the circuit infrastructure to help, you know, create these ties, beef up ampacity, give us the opportunity to be able to backfeed and tie. You know, that comes with a lot of work, you know, and you'll see, you know, our trucks out there, you know, completing this work, and we're looking at doing this, you know, coming up very soon. We have forestry work scheduled to be completed by 2025. Unlike many other places we go to, you know, forestry isn't your biggest impact. Line and equipment failures are usually what's kind of, you know, setting off the reliability metrics for you in your areas here. So what we want to do to kind of combat that a little bit too, if you want to go to the next slide, is we want to start looking at, I think that's it. Yeah, there you go. We want to start looking at, you know, we mentioned the substations and their geographic distance and, you know, how they make up, you know, let's say section of the hills and that URD, which is a tremendous URD, a lot of underground cabling, a lot of customers on the URD. And it's not typical for us to see a URD that is fed from 5 different substations. I don't look at that as a problem. I look at that as an opportunity, which means we have 5 different feeds to possibly try to help that URD. So, you know, one of the things we can do is we can make sure all the adjacent circuits and the adjacent substations are back in its normal configuration. Over the last few years, we've had a substation out of its normal configuration, which has caused us to kind of not have some of the opportunity to backfeed, or tie the circuits when we've had sections of the hills trip out. We're going to get about a megawatt of load back when we go through with this project. And this is slated to be completed, you know, sometime this year. I think it says the end of October, but I think that's probably, I would say, more like the end of this year.
And is that work being performed at the substation or at the line leading from the
All
substation?
in the lines. It's all upgrading the lines, creating premier operating districts. And we do that by we put up sectionalization devices. So you heard Jackie mention a device called a recloser. A recloser is like a circuit breaker on the pole, and it's able to basically, you know, like with the protective devices, indicate a fault downstream, it'll operate and it'll try to switch. And the idea for a recloser isn't really that we just reclose to bring everybody back on. We're trying to reclose and make whatever fell on the line a transient fault. The transient fault does not stay on. It's not a voltage fault. So when we have transient faults and then you trip at reclose, hence your momentaries, right? Because you might be out for 30 seconds, but no longer, your lights come on and they stay on. And that's what we want. Okay, so, you know, it's a windy day, sticks blew across went across phase to phase on a line somewhere, the recloser solid. Whereas in you know, 20, 30 years ago, either a fuse would blow and then we'd have to roll a truck, or the breaker at the substation would operate and the entire circuit would be out, not just the section that we're trying to create. Again, it's about reducing the number of customers that experience the outage and reducing the duration in which they see the outage. So creating the sectionalization devices, putting them up there, creating these pods is something that we're really striving to do. And again, these things will all take time, but eventually we'll create a good distribution network that has redundancy to it, which we probably didn't have in the past.
So let's talk about the redundancy for a second. We can go back to the PPAC circuit. So that runs up 206 from the hill. So you probably got a 4 or 5 mile run to the PPAC substation. It's unprotected. There's no loop scheme there. So every time there's a branch down that line, motor vehicle hits a pole, as well as a substation, which I think needs some investment because it has been problematic for years. We had one incident in June of 2023 where it went up and down constantly for about 4 or 5 hours. So is the investment being made in both that PPAC substation as well as putting some type of loop scheme or redundancy into that long unprotected run now back down to the hills?
So there is no loop scheme there, but there's an opportunity for a loop scheme. In fact, there's an opportunity for a loop scheme almost right outside the URD entrance where PPAC will tie to, I believe, Greater Crossroads sub right outside the northwestern section of the URD. And that's exactly what the reliability folks are doing, currently. So I've asked them to kind of put together a few suggestions that aren't just, hey, because the things that we're presenting here are things that we already have in place. They've been vetted. We've been on these projects now for the better part of the year. What we've asked them to start looking into is what else can we do further. And when I took a look at this, when we started, stuff started getting trickled up to me. the first thing I started looking at is where overhead lines could we start creating the redundancy? And the short answer is there's opportunity there. So we're going to be looking at those opportunities and exploiting them. That's not the only place we're looking. In fact, I'm looking at trying to create loops for most of these substations. I mean, it's a good opportunity to create loops because it doesn't just help the hills, it'll help everybody on those sections of circuits like up 206, like you stated. I mean, all those customers will benefit from these operating districts.
And for the benefit of the audience, can you describe what a loop scheme is? So
A loop scheme is basically where we're able to, from a distribution standpoint, loop two sources together through these sectionalization devices. It would be great if I had a presentation. We have a really good presentation on loops and we have some good illustrations because the best way to really show this is with an illustration. But if you can imagine two sources, and you have a section of circuit, one section faulted, the recloser here can open up and then, you can basically backfeed the circuit through another source. And this happens all automatically within, a minute,
You okay?
So ultimately, creating these premier operating districts and having loops is what we really want to do. Because if you just have loops too, depending on how good you create your loops, you could have holes in your loops too. So if the circuit, if you have there could be an Achilles heel in your circuit, or you could have, the tree come down in that area that like it will just take out that one section. You got to sectionalize. So you want to, if a tree comes down, you want to be able to open up two reclosers, sectionalize the fault, and then backfill customers, and then through the loop backfeed the rest of that circuit. But that comes with challenges because you mentioned the substation, you mentioned the current wires that are up there. Some of these wires and some of these things have been up there for a while. And we have loaded up the circuits, we've loaded up everything, we've built up around it, in terms of, people living and businesses growing. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position where if we're in like 8 days, 10 days, 20 days like we have in the summer of significantly hot weather, we kind of start degrading the infrastructure, and our ability to put that load other places diminishes. So we want to be in a position where we're able to handle all those loads. And again, with time, that's the idea. That's the circuit of the future. That was an excellent question, by the way. I mean, when I come up here and talk about loop schemes, a lot of times, we don't get that question. As an engineer, I just tend to just keep talking. So, ask those questions, please. Because that is going to be a big backbone of how we're going to try to basically build the redundancy in our distribution system. Our substations do need some TLC. We are looking at any upgrades and we have upgraded the substations. However, the infrastructure may look ugly from the streets. We have upgraded some of the brains, the relays and controls in these substations. And we've done other things like, communication wise and all this other stuff has ancillary benefit to the customer. Basically, like the dispatchers have visibility to everything, which limits our restoration times and increases the amount of time, or decreases the amount of time it takes us to tackle a problem that we don't know about. So, I mean, all of this stuff comes with, benefit. We just have to apply it appropriately and where it makes sense. And it takes every solution a little different. So like the hills is a little bit different than say other areas of the township as well. So,
and
I
obviously
have a question.
this also comes with cost. So
Yeah.
what is the commitment from JCP&L in terms of making those investments, put in those loop schemes, to update the substations, do what you need to do to get this back on track?
So there's a couple different avenues on how we want to tackle this. We have a program that is we currently are awaiting approvals with our Energize New Jersey. And we built a fairly large program that would go through and we had a lot of investment to basically do that circuit of the future upgrades everywhere. And this was a fairly large program, to the tune of over $900 million that we want to do. I'm sure you guys might have read about that.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And so, ideally we were going to fund a large amount of that through those programs and through other avenues as well in those programs. So we mentioned the substations DTLC. In that program, we had a lot of relay and breaker upgrades, getting rid of some of the antiquated equipment that hasn't failed, but it'd be a preventative measure that would provide benefit or avoid future outages. There was a lot of circuit of the future upgrades within that. There was a lot of loop schemes in that program. I mean, that's the backbone of it. And anytime that we did any kind of circuit work in that program, it was to the standard of circuit of the future. We're talking, no more than 200 to 300 customers between sectionalization devices. So we have a pod, it's like 300 customers in that pod only. But again, yes, that all comes as a cost. It all comes with a cost, and they're fairly involved. We're doing a few programs right now or circuits right now where we're doing some upgrades to them right now, and it's just there's.
So
a lot of
I'm not sure if the money is, and the allocation of the money is addressed later in the presentation. But we see up on the screen right now, 800,000 spent, I guess in a nearby circuit. Then there was the other reference to the Greater Crossroads upgrade. That's all money that's been allocated and is available this quarter. Okay.
If I'm not speaking.
No, yeah, you're correct. Yeah.
I think they're working on that now.
The other thing too, for energizing today too, is we've gone to board public utilities, our regulators, to spend this amount of money. It's not 36 billion. It's up to them. They come back and tell us we can spend.
But I think it's important to know what's already presently
Yes.
approved, allocated, shovel ready and committed to, whether it's this quarter or next quarter versus those projects that are waiting on BPU approval, which may be
Yeah. Not sure.
at some
Yeah,
time.
these are current. They're working, I think, this week on the one. I think it started,
Yes.
so,
Yeah, both of these projects you mentioned are happening.
yeah.
All right. And just curious, any idea when that BPU approval is going to happen?
I don't know if you have other information.
Hopefully, maybe we'll hear at the end of the month.
Okay.
Yeah, we're hopeful, and I think we're finding, at least in my territory north, a lot of our towns are ready for the investment that we'd like to make. So,
And assuming some level of approval, then how quickly do the projects get started? Is it immediate, like it gets approved in third quarter, fourth quarter, there's shovels in the ground, or, I mean, how long does the planning for all this take?
The BPU, I mean, there's guidelines onto how when we can spend the money, and all that will be kind of worked out through the as that all gets settled. But as we went into the filing, the idea, and I can only speak to what we went in and filed as, is that, we have it's a 5-year program. So basically, if we come to settlement with, the BPU and everything's good to go, most likely we'll be, shovels in the ground or starting, everything Q1 in 2025 at this point. So we're not looking to push this off for years. Like if we get the okay to do this level of customer experience impact, we want to do that ASAP.
But the important thing is you have 2 major projects going on right now. It's going to benefit Bedminster.
And there's those projects, and the things that we didn't put on here because, we're currently still dreaming them up, so to speak, is the loop scheme, the reclose we talked about, and there's a few other instances like that. Those things will provide heavy reliability benefits. And it's one thing that we can kind of look to communicate out to. I mean,
yeah, I was just gonna hit on that. That's what I was discussing with you in the beginning here, is that we invest in our equipment. We lack notifying the public of the investment sometimes, so we're getting better at that. It's always been in the name of safety as well as the protection we have for Department of Homeland Security in terms of what we can share and what we can't. But we do have projects, we have corporate communications involved with it to get the information out to our electeds. Have it be palatable that the general public can understand what we're saying in this press release of what we're doing. And then as we get further along in this, we're probably going to be holding site meetings at locations after we've done installations to explain the equipment to the governing body or administrator or needs to know that municipality. So that'll be forthcoming.
So Sean, you still got the presentation? No. Was that a detour or you still have plenty more slides to go?
We do have a few more.
Okay.
I want to give the opportunity for questions too, so I'll go through these. So anything else you want to touch on this one?
no, I would just keep talking. So you guys should just stop me.
That's okay. So another quick update, I'm sure customers have seen this, if not, but we've made an update to our outage map. This is by our provider, Kubra. They do most of the outage maps for all the electric utilities in the state. And the biggest update to this map is that we now have a polygon feature that will show the actual outage profile. So it's particularly useful for police, OEM, fire to get a damage profile for the municipality where they're seeing most customers impacted. It got its real first stress test probably, I think last month in Ohio, they had 7 tornadoes hit.
Yeah.
There's 5 tornadoes hit.
Yeah.
And the outage map was live in Ohio, and if you pulled it up and that was your territory, you could see the profile and everything was colored, everything had different restoration times and things like that. So we are confident that if we do get another big storm like an Isaias or a hurricane, God forbid, that this information will get to the customers and be accurate information for them. I'm sure previous reliability presentations have explained the ETR process in terms of the global and the challenges we have with that, correct? Yeah, so the goal is with that now is there is an ETR team that's going to populate user ETRs are called for multiple customer outages. Obviously our biggest customer outages we're able to pinpoint exactly, broken trees, broken poles, it's probably gonna be 12 to 16 hours. So we can get through there. We can put that on instead of 8 days from now.
We beg you not to put global
Yes.
ETRs in there because then every customer thinks they're
Yeah.
going to be out for 8 days.
Well, and the reason this happened was after Isaias, I mean, we had the fastest restoration of any other utility, ES, ACE, Orange and Rockland. We still got inundated with people yelling at us saying this is, and to be honest, I get it, because, people have to plan. If there's a storm of that magnitude, if you're gonna be out for 7 days, you just went to go get a hotel and all it was a fuse at the end of your street, you came back that night, I would be pretty upset too. So what we're doing here now is before that global ETR has to be issued, we are trying as best as we can with multiple customer outages to get a user ETR on there so that they don't see that global. And the global is really for gonna be those customers that have the service that was damaged to their house. They have to have electrician come in for repairs, get cut in car, inspected, things like that. That's really where that number comes into play, is that global ETR.
And again, for the audience, you may want to explain user versus global ETR.
Yeah, so global is, the BP requires every electric utility to give the worst case scenario for that district of when is the last customer coming back, whether it's an issue with their house or it's a multiple customer outage, when is the last person to come back online. User ETR is either a damage assessor, a foreman, line shop manager, lineman, someone has seen the damage and knows exactly how long it takes to repair something that they're witnessing. And they say, this is a 2-day job, or this is a 3-day job, and they're giving those ETRs to the customers. So far, I mean, what we're seeing is they're obviously a lot closer to global, that goes without saying, but so far, we're pretty good with these in terms of bigger storms that we've seen so far, which I think really this summer was just that, we had the remnants of that tropical storm, the Debbie, I think, came through in June. But it's still ongoing, still always a process improvement, there's still things we're tweaking throughout this process, but it is getting better.
And to add to that, we do have a team who, let's say it's a multi-day storm. It's gonna be, we know it's gonna be 5 to 7 days. They will even estimate who's gonna be restored on day 2, 3, 4, and then when you get the boots on the ground to get into the narrow details, we'll even give by 6 o'clock tonight, they really are fine tuning it. We're really doing good with that because my phone will blow up when we put out the global.
Yes.
From an OEM perspective,
The other thing
it's
that
important for you.
I didn't mean to pay off, I'm sorry. The other, just in terms of ETRs, the other thing I'd say is that we're also adding to that of disabling ETRs. So if there's a storm and we see a damage profile that's extremely large, we have 17,000 people out in one district, we should stop setting the system ETR 2 hours from now.
Right.
So that is ceasing.
Thank you. Because people want to plan and know.
Correct.
Right. If you tell them 2 hours and then it's 16 hours, I could have made different plans.
And if you look at our Facebook during the storm, that is the top comment. It just keeps getting pushed back. It
Right.
was 9, it was 11, now it's 1, now it's 3, now.
Yeah.
So we're doing,
Right.
getting better at disabling that for customers so they don't see that.
I mean, where that's gonna always kind of be a point of contention is when the weather event first begins to roll in. You don't know, the system doesn't, it's, because I know, because I live like, more in towards, or I guess towards PA, and so the weather as it comes in, this, we get hit with it first, and there's plenty of times where. As part of, one of the most, westerly circuits that I'm on, my power goes out frequently. And I'll get the same thing, my ETR will come up, I'll get the messages on my phone. And I find that usually it's consistent with when the weather event initiates. So we know that, we have a couple things in play where I think we're gonna try to, help get better at that, and we recognize that, because. For me, I mean, from a customer standpoint, that's what gets me, because my wife will be on there. She'll be saying, what's going on with these ETRs?
Yeah, and in tandem with that too is the smart meter program as well, like that won't allow us to rely on calls anymore.
I was just gonna ask you, how much of that data is being supplied by smart meters versus customers calling the 800 number or putting it on the web? Is it?
I don't know the exact number, but I know that it's active only because I have a smart meter and it's been reported my outages before I reported my outages. I get a text message saying outage detected in your area, the standard information.
And any idea in this particular area when we're gonna get the smart meters?
Whole state be complete by 2025, but I don't know specifically for Bedminster. We can find that out.
Yeah, I think we just, be good information. to have.
Is that pending the BPU approval that's already approved?
Correct. So we're rolling it out along with the other utilities in the state. Customers can see their energy consumption, things like that. It also helps when we have big storms to get the information real time, rather than rely on calls, compile the data. That's a couple minutes wasted throughout that whole process. Now it's real time. I believe, again, correctly if I'm mistaken, but I believe climate informant, things like that, can ping the meters from their trucks too.
The engineers are doing that right now.
The engineers are doing that to see if they're getting power back. There's we.
Yeah. So I mean, that would all take valuable resources towards the end of restoration, when you start to get down from the ones and the twos and everything. So now we can, be smarter about it. And I would say the last two storms have been significantly improved the tail end of restoration. That restoration curve is significantly more expeditious, I would say, because of the smart meter. So it'll be really good for us all when they get done.
Yeah.
In 2025.
It's crew allocation as well. It's not burning tires, wrench time,
Yeah.
setting someone who's been power since the first day, but never replied to our text. That's the time. So. All right, so next slide, again, I want to go through these quickly. This is important, but I want to be able to answer every question that we have. So obviously, this is our restoration graph, just so everybody's this is the process that we follow. We do activate our ICS process, our exit command. Then we operate, each of us have a role in that storm process. But the first part in a storm after we've experienced it is to isolate and make safe that those hours are performing life and limb emergencies or cut and runs, they're called, where we have, a street closure, cut the wire, open the road. Cut and runs, life and limb priorities, where you may have a live wire in a cop car, or, a leaking oil tank, their service wires damaging around it. True life and death priorities, that's what we're getting in the first few hours, making sure customers in our line are safe. Second is to repair the high voltage and transmission lines. We need our transmission lines active for our substations, which then feed the homes. That's extremely important. ESIS, we had a large number of quarantine circuits and transmission related outages. I think it was, I still remember the number, I think it was 86% of our outages from ESIS were trees outside of the neighborhood, which is just nuts, but a lot of them in our transmission corridor. So we have to get those substations back online. Then we follow the process and restore our critical facilities in our municipality. The way that process works is our municipal OEMs are funneling the county, funneling their priorities to the county. County is rack and stacking them for us that we get. Priority restoration unit activates, and we start responding to emergencies where, let's say a nursing home has an hour of fuel left, there's a tree blocking the driveway. Yes, you got it, get someone there right now. This is what we're doing. This is what the county's providing to us this first, 12 hours or so we're getting to these critical facilities. They include everything, our police stations, municipal buildings, voting locations, COVID schools with on there, COVID testing facilities, things like that needed on there during the pandemic. And then from there, we're repairing our main feeder lines, which serve our largest number of customers. And then from that point, the longest part of the storm is for those individual customers that, as I mentioned prior, have individual issues at their residence with their service to their house. Yeah. And then what these next two slides are important, I think. One benefit of being part of First Energy is we're part of 3 RMAGs, they're called Regional Mutual Assistance Groups. There are other electric utilities we pull from, so not only do we have those companies that are out of state, if we get hit by a storm. We also, in addition to that, have 10 operating companies with First Energy that we pull our sister groups from for storm. And we did have, I think, the last tropical storm, we had brought in 183 contractors in addition to mutual assistance as well to prepare the restoration. We are part of 3 of those, the Southeastern Electric Exchange, North Virginia, and Great Lake. Because again, First Energy is from West Virginia, Maryland, north to New Jersey. We have like 500 customers, I think, in New York State. It's just looking at circuit design all the way out to the line. And obviously, this kind of breeze past this, but we work in a nice part of the state, very tree laden. But this is the breakdown in terms of the service territory that we have, the tree density in New Jersey. Ours is shadowed in the left-hand state picture in the red. That's our service territory. The PS, that's the middle. Atlantic City Electric is in the bottom, southern portion, orange and Rockland is difficult topography, difficult, but. And then this is our inspection cycle. So obviously we do annual inspections, they're alternating based upon circuit. Same with forestry, we do pole inspections. Forestry is every 4 years, but pole are every 10. Overhead underground circuits, equipment inspections every 5 years, and then we have a thermographic camera that we utilize for, blind to the naked eye type of damage on our equipment. We get a pinhole in the fuse or something like that. We're using thermographic cameras to run those circuits to find those issues. But this is the cycle that we have for the substations.
Is there any indication based on the data that those are sufficient cycles? Like I'm looking at forestry. Is the data telling you we shouldn't be doing 4 years, we should be doing 2 years or something else?
So far for forestry,
Might want to grab the mic, by the way.
Yeah, for forestry, 4 years is typical for the regrowth that we see for the cuts that we make. So that is pretty standard, and we see it's not typical for us to have an overgrowth or like a surge in growth around that 4-year cycle. We do have, unfortunately, a lot of new plantings in neighborhoods where people aren't familiar that they can't put a huge azalea in front of a pad mount. We're going to rip it out. Or they're planting an oak tree underneath 3-phase primary. Big issue. We try to talk to those customers in advance saying, we're just going to be here in 10 years. We're either going to cut it like this or we can drop it, but you can't plant this under our equipment. So typically for forestry, that is an average. The regrowth's around 4 years takes.
When the equipment starts to get old, do you check up on it sooner? Like, does it go into a shorter review period? Or it stays at 5 years and just stays at 5? But I would think as your equipment gets older, it needs a little more love before that.
Yeah, and I mean, do you want to? No. Yeah, I mean, the 5-year cycle is typical, but if we have like an issue at those pieces of equipment over and over and over again, they're just going to proactively replace it.
Okay, then
So
this
it
team
bumps.
comes in.
Right.
So if you want to clarify that question, as equipment gets older, like preventatively change things out, is that what you're asking, or like because these inspections are mostly visual inspections, so like, you're looking at, we can use a transformer, for example. I can look at a transformer that's been up there for 35 years and it may look old and degraded, but it works just fine. We don't do any comprehensive testing that would require customers to be out of service for any amount of time or anything like that. We hope to find those things with our thermal inspections. So the infrared inspection would tell us that any hotspots or any unfriendly electrical things that might rear its ugly head. We don't do those things based on the age of the equipment. We just do it on a routine cycle.
Well, one of the things we're seeing, particularly in the hills, you've got ground mounted transformers. So between landscapers, and dogs, they're rushing out more quickly and they're probably 30 or 35 years old now. So now you're getting the opportunity for the squirrel to get in there or something else and fry itself. So I think that's kind of the genesis of the question is, particularly in the hills, inspecting those boxes on a regular basis might be helpful from a preventative standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, if you see any that have holes or things like that people can have access to, get that to me as soon as possible.
We've been trying that. I know there's a transformer shortage, but yes,
Okay.
our residents let us know, and that's why we want to make sure.
Even if it's not a full swap, we have things we can put over it.
They've done cold patches, but in
They
some
have,
cases,
okay.
they're literally falling apart, like the rust is holding the rust together. I mean,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big that, we probably just replace that transformer. Obviously, it's an old green box, the box is already green, but it just like. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I can understand that, and we would replace those. And, there's a shortage on some of the longer lead time items, pad mounts, and they're included in there. That's another thing that we're up against too, but for the immediate fixes for the reliability, in your area, yes, I'd love to put transformers, big substations in the middle of all the load centers, but I can't get a transformer for 5 years, so I mean, it's just a lot of lead time. Now, we have orders, we have a perpetual, solution to that, but that has a little easier. So.
Yeah, COVID caused quite a bit of issues, as well as sort of the war with Russia, Ukraine. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's impacting.
Right. And we definitely were impacted by that, so.
Yeah, we're sorting through it best we can. Obviously, we have somewhat of a path forward with the avenues to get the longer lead time items. Like we're trying to stock our shelves with whatever we can, get to fulfill our duty to serve our customers.
Vegetation management, I'll touch on this slide very briefly. This is inside our transmission corridor. If you live in a transmission corridor, you may have seen this, the helicopter inspections, but also the helicopter trimming. It's truly frightening if you're seeing that in person. It's like a 15-foot long chainsaw that just flies down the transmission corridor, cutting back the regrowth, but extremely effective and has reduced significantly the number of fallings that we've seen in the corridor. But in addition to that, they're doing, they're spraying for vegetation that we have regrowth underneath the lines and things like that. They do that on a cycle as well. Typically, the transmission forester, I think, actually probably comes in here and speaks to, I don't know if it's you or someone in a particular department, but we give plenty of advance notice that we're coming inside the corridor. But just another thing that we do here. And then this was a picture of what I was talking about before in terms of the infrared camera. So those circuits inspections are done in a 5-year cycle. Any equipment issues that we have are replaced or repaired. And wood inspection polls from, typically it's usually Osmos has been the company in the past that has done most of the utilities in the state. I don't know if we've changed it this year or not. It's still Osmos, okay. But you'll see them digging into the pole that we're putting things in and digging at the base, things like that, to basically test the structural integrity of it, make sure we don't have any termites. If it got swiped by a truck and it's losing balance or things, we'll reattach guys, put a C-truss on there to improve the structural integrity of it. But that's on a 10-year cycle. Typically, you'll probably get calls for that from the electeds who sees some strange guy in a vest digging around the pole outside their house, but that's typically Osmos. And then, as I mentioned before, that thermographic camera that they use to identify those issues where if you have, let's say, a lightning bolt that comes down, it's an easy connection with our equipment from that bolt, and you may get offshoots of that, create a pinhole in the insulation around our wiring. High heat days for 6 weeks, that pinhole may get a little bit bigger. You may have the damage, you may have a break. So the thermographic camera identifies those. It's a bright screen with a very bright dot on where we see an issue inside of our equipment. I think that may be it. It is.
So we started off with some of the reliability assessment. What is the position with respect to the Bedminster service on reliability? Right, so there were numbers, but now how do we put that into practical terms? Is the reliability situation for Bedminster worse than other service areas? Is there something in there that prioritizes us, or are we sitting here going, this is just the way the system operates and we'll get to you when we get to you, as far as improvements and the other investments? So how is the reliability after you run your analysis?
What I mentioned in the beginning, I think still holds true. It's a very, very difficult summer. But this is one of the few council meetings where I'm going with concrete information of 2 pretty significant investment projects. So I think that says a lot about how it's been down in this section.
Okay, so it's been a difficult summer.
Right.
But once again, sort of zeroing in on, it's been a difficult summer across the state.
Right.
But zeroing in on Bedminster relative to our, well, relative to other towns, other jurisdictions.
Actually, what I do want to touch on though, and I have to give a lot of credit to Sean and his team, because those projects were, you know, in the works and in the planning before the storms came. So those investments, that's what his team does all the time. I think, Sean, you'll be able to answer better as far as they compare to other areas. But, you know, with those investments, those projects going to happen, it's going to definitely benefit Bedminster.
Yeah, and just as a caveat, whatever we, excuse me, whatever we presented here today is not gonna be the only things that we're doing here. I mean, we are, you know, definitely in, you know, the business to improve the customer experience. To answer your question, how do you guys fare as compared to other areas? Not that bad, actually. You guys are doing okay reliability wise, but the company still sees an opportunity here to improve reliability. There's obviously an opportunity here, even in the vicinity of the hills, right? I did like a sample population today. I just said I'm gonna click on 6 customers in the hills development and check their outage history and what was the cause of the outage. And I think 6 off of 3 different substations, 3 different circuits, and all 6 were related to the breaker opening at the substation. That to me is supporting, you know, to what you and I were talking about creating these loop seams that are going to be able to keep the sections of the URD intact with the breaker to operate. And as you pointed out, you know, overhead lines are exposure. You know, everyone wants to underground everything, but underground is nice because it's prettier, but it also makes it hard to maintain, makes it hard to fix when things are broken, and it's also very, very costly to maintain and put in. But what we can do is we can protect the URDs that we have by creating sectionalization devices. So I don't have your rank and where you are, what circuits rank where, and out of all the circuits, but comparatively, there are a lot of not so good in the reliability aspects of things. Most of those are due to off right of way trees. I think 90% of outages in North Jersey are caused by off right of way trees. But again, like I said, just because you're not the worst doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity and the company doesn't recognize it.
So coming back to the 2 projects, so one is at Greater Crossroads, and did you identify the second? You said it was out of area, but that it would have consequential benefits in our service area.
So Greater Crossroads, what that does is that job there was a lot of reconductoring on adjacent circuits, which gives you guys the ability to tie to them, just like they gives you the ability to tie them to tie to you. So there's cross benefit there. The $800,000 investment out of PPAC was to basically upgrade the infrastructure, including increasing wire sizes, beefing up some of the protection and sectionalization devices. So we're typically, you know, giving us a longer runway, if that makes sense.
So that's Greater Crossroads substation and the PPAC substation, correct?
And those are just the ones, again, like Jackie pointed out, that we've had in the works already this year. You know, my team has been kind of working on, you know, where can we make big improvements, reliability improvements that are, I don't want to call them low hanging fruit, but they're achievable and they're attainable. When we start to get you know, kind of ahead of ourselves and we say, hey, I'm going to spend, you know, $2 million here, I'm going to rebuild all your infrastructure, I'm going to rebuild all the poles and put all these new wires up. And then we start to have, you know, other, you know, environmental gets involved, forestry gets involved, and people don't want poles, they don't want, you know, construction, and we end up taking years to make big investment upgrades like that. So we've kind of pivoted in the last couple of months where we're kind of saying, you know, we think to ourselves like, okay, I think we're at that point that we're starting to get realistic with ourselves, right? Okay, where there's opportunities, where are there opportunities that are actually, and when we can do them in a good amount of time, that present real reliability benefit. And when I say reliability, I'm not just talking about the numbers that we threw up on the screen anymore. It's about what the customers are experiencing. In fact, a perfect example of that is, you know, since I took over managing, I have all of engineering. I have reliability, planning, protection, analysis. I have everything. And what I had my engineers start to do is I had to break them out of the mindset of saying, okay, well, that's storm. That was all storm. Forget all the customers, forget the customer minutes. I live in a bad circuit area. I don't care if it's storm or not. Neither does my wife, nor does anybody else. So like, we have to get away from storm, non-storm, whatever the situation is, the customers just need to get improvement. And we're not sitting here trying to fool anybody, or we're trying to be transparent and direct with everybody. Again, I use that analogy with the tree falling outside of your house. We're never going to claim that we're going to catch it all. I don't have any engineering nets that I can put over top of the trees or below the trees. But what I can promise is with a little bit of time, we're trying to make the impact of that customer small and shorter. So with those loop schemes, that's the key. Like I really want to try to create that network and develop that distribution network. I mean, but it's going to take a little bit of time.
And Sean, you mentioned underground wiring, and just anecdotally, we've seen an uptick in terms of primary failures and lateral failures. I don't know if it's because of the age of the underground wiring that particularly is in the hills, because that's all fed by overhead wiring until you get there. Is there a concern there based on what you're seeing, what the data is telling you right now?
There is, and directly to, yeah, there is. As I started the conversation with you guys this evening was, typically we come out and say it's all tree related stuff. It's just not. It is line equipment failure, and some of it's happening in the lockout zone, which is, that zone that's like right, kind of in the vicinity of the substation. So it's like basically, the source is going to see it open up and kind of everything downstream where there is affected. So where we need to start working on things is improve the wire, right? And then sectionalize. Those are the two things that we're focused on. And that's why I say here, even though you guys aren't on like a worst circuit, you're not on our highest priority circuits, because your reliability data doesn't support that. It doesn't mean that there's opportunity to make these investments, because, again, they're investments that will provide real benefit, real reliability benefit. Your laterals, just like anywhere else though, they tend to be lower sized wire because they're farther away from the source. I mean, obviously we don't need to have, very thick wire, especially if it's a one-phase lateral, which means there's only one wire feeding it. The opportunity for us to use that same section of wire to loop and backfeed will be almost non-existing. What we have done in those situations though, is we replace the fuses with trip saver devices. So transient faults will automatically trip and reclose themselves. We've seen a significant improvement across the system doing that. What we have seen though is, no help with the bolted faults. Like, again, when those big trees come down or carpal accidents, the trip savers don't really save anything. They just operate.
But just remember, trip saver, you're going to see that, momentarily.
Yes.
But it's better than a
Yes.
2-hour outage,
And it's 3 times
Yeah.
within 5 minutes.
and the fault clears, you're back in power.
It's 3 times within 5 minutes now. That might change. But either way, you'll still see the momentary, and the transient faults will obviously include. We're looking at like a 45% reduction in transient related customer minutes experienced. So that's that.
So before we open up to the public for questions, any further questions, comments from Township Committee?
Is there anything we can do to help you get that money through BPU?
I think you already have the letter of support.
Okay,
But we'll-
can residents write a letter or make a phone call, or? Does that just get in the way?
They do have opportunity on the BPU's website if they want to put in, letter of support, if they want to do that.
Yeah, or public hearing would be the one
Oh, yeah, that'll be coming
where
up.
we have our electeds who come out and support it, or residents who are passionate about it, they can come out.
We'll provide you the information once it's available.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Only open up to the public and.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up questions for the JCP&L representatives. First, what we're going to do is for those who are here in person, we're going to run through the room. Robin, do we have another microphone at
portable
the?
mic.
We do? Okay, so what I'm going to ask you all to do is, Robin, you can be our, walk around the room for us. Raise your hand when Robin comes to you. Give your name and your street. You do not have to give your house number. So name and street, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Susan Joy Greco, Westcott Road. I got that right. I've been a resident since 1995. And I want to.
First of all, I want to compliment Chief because this summer, what outage, they were very, very hot on it. So I appreciated that. But then I have to ask the question, do you understand why we're getting outages when there's not even storms? It's like, is there a real awareness about the process? Because I think to myself, here we're having like 100 degrees for like 8 weeks. One tiny outage for half an hour. But then during a bright sunny day, nothing going on, my power went out for 3 hours. And I want to know if you have a real process of understanding. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can respond to it if you want. Sure. So, you remember what month your outage was?
The tiny one in the middle of the heat.
Yeah,
August,
it was August, so,
it was like half an hour.
yeah, half an hour, okay. So, most likely, and again, when I review the outages from this past year, there wasn't, and again, usually when I review outages through North Jersey specifically, there's always a big tree component. And there really isn't. It's the line and equipment failure that, we have to, kind of respond to. Most likely, again, the heat degrades the system and it takes a lot of wear and tear on it. And sometimes there are failures that we don't see and they just happen because they're going to happen. And, we want to limit the customer duration of that outage. So if you're out for a half hour, that probably was enough time for the troubleshooters to respond and go ahead and correct the issue. And again, the things that we kind of outlined in the discussion points that we had here about sectionalizing and creating some redundancy, that's going to help even those 30-minute outages. In all cases, especially with a 30-minute outage that I was looking at, and I think it happens to be, I think you said Greco Road or you said, yeah, Westcott, that's right. It was a Tuesday. Monday or Tuesday. I think, the outages that I saw in those areas where, again, the breaker had operated at the substation, which is telling me that it was probably an equipment failure in the section of circuit that we're most vulnerable in. So again, we're looking at areas again, because it's attainable work we can do to go ahead and try to limit that section where we're most, at risk, unprotected zones or whatever we want to call them, to try to help that. But, what we have to start avoiding is the longer, like, okay, the 3-hour outages. I was, 30-minute outage on a blue sky day, hey, okay, so why did the equipment fail? What can we do to prevent the equipment from failing? And we're looking into that. We're looking at ways we can, improve, and really giving the dispatchers visibility real time with some of the improvements that we're making, those ancillary benefits I was referring to. When we put these sectionalization devices up, it also tells our dispatchers exactly where the failures are. So even a 30-minute outage where we have boots on the ground already, there's a troubleshooter 5 minutes away. Now they don't have to spend 20 minutes looking for where the tree came down. They could just go ahead right to it and really take those customer minutes of interruption down. But 30 minutes is a good operational metric. If we had to get boots on the ground, if we had to, send a troubleshooter out there, restore them within 30 minutes safely, pretty good job by the troubleshooter. But again, avoiding the outage altogether prefers.
No.
But I appreciate, the accolade there, for the summertime. It was, a very tough summer. So I appreciate the kind of. In the spring, I think you had I think there was closer to 200-minute outage. That would have been like 2.5, 3 hours somewhere. Yeah. So yeah. Equipment failure.
I also appreciate that, because I've been watching the study for some time, and that, that you brought up the equipment, because we've only heard trees. Thank you for that. I would like very much for you to bring that new presentation, because I think that would really iron things out. Would you commit to that?
Yeah, I can,
I mean, if everyone else wants to hear.
yeah, no, I mean, I think we do have some information or some presentations that we have community that comms had okay, yeah, so, yeah, I'll work through Jackie and her team and we'll get something out.
Thank you so much.
Jeff Planner and also Prescott, her neighbor, I'm also the president of those solution work. And one of the things I wanted to mention to you, well, a couple of things, okay? The smart meters, I guess, latch on to what Colin was saying before, very important. I think you gotta do that ASAP so that you guys get your data. In the meantime, I have a list of texts with Colin Hickey, who you guys owe a lot to. Every time something goes out, Colin cares about it. So I can give you dates, times, durations, and another thing, our local Facebook group usually starts blowing up within a matter of 30 seconds. So, I mean, the data's there. So until you get, that smart meter stuff in place, that's, we can give you that information. And that's one thing. Number two, I mean, and I think most of our power failures tend to be further upstream, because most of the hills, not all of it, is underground. Okay, I mean, there are some issues there, but most of the time, these are major failures that occur to a lot of homes at the time. So it's usually happening on a main road or whatever, whether it's a squirrel, which is, every time I hear about it's a squirrel, I'm like getting all this time. So we've got to figure out a way to, I mean, it's 2024, we can find a way to keep the infrastructure for, I'm just talking about what else that. So, but that's always a major failure somewhere, because so much of it's so far. So I just wanted to mention those two things. I appreciate that. Good. Thank you.
And the comment on the squirrels, yeah, they are frustrating and you're right, there are measures that we have taken, they actually, so, I live, again, more west of here on 78. They actually just put one of these recloser devices up not too far from me on a different circuit, unfortunately. Right. But it's always a different circuit, right? So, and I happen to look up and the animal guarding on this thing is pretty intense. I mean, so there's that, and they're squirrels is what they're targeting, obviously. But when I managed substation for a number of years, I always had a general manager who every time we had a squirrel related outage, she would always ask me the same thing. How'd that squirrel get in there, Sean?
But some kind of like electric fence or something around.
And then 15 years ago, when we didn't have access to all the animal guarding, it's like, we always thought, like, we put our substation so no one sees it in the middle of the forest somewhere usually. And then it was just kind of like, wait, how did the squirrel get in there? He walked in, he showed himself in the front gate. That was how it was.
The other thing that scares me too is that more and more people are gonna be, getting these hybrid electric cars too. It's gonna increase the demand for power, so it's only gonna exacerbate.
So that's a whole topic of discussion. We could spend another hour. If you want, if you got time after that. Yeah.
Thank you.
But that's important to recognize though, because it's, we move on, but there's some misunderstanding where people think that if you put a charger in your house that it doesn't draw a lot of load, it draws considerable load. So.
Hey, you're up.
My name is Rich Costa. I'm in High Palm Lane, and I'm also the president of Wood Duck Pond. I see quite a few people here from the hills tonight. Sean, you had mentioned 90% of outages in North Jersey typically caused from vegetation. I know when it comes to, you had also mentioned that, when it comes to low hanging fruit and easy repairs, that provide reliability, that's something that you try to target. Now, with the PPAC substation that provides electricity to our community and a lot of the neighboring communities who are out there, that there's between the substation and Leamington Road, those lines are running through a lot of heavy vegetation. And that vegetation, I can share pictures with you after this meeting if you're interested. But literally, these trees, if they're being pruned by the forestry department every 4 years, you want to hit some low hanging fruit. You may want to think about doing it once every year or every 2 years.
What road was this?
This is right on Route 206 between Lamington Road and the PPAC substation.
Okay, I appreciate that. Definitely take that back. Now, this circuit is, well, some of these circuits are scheduled for next year, I believe, for tree trimming, some of them, but
Yeah.
there's supplemental tree trimming that we can do too when we receive feedback like this, especially if what you're telling me sounds like it's in what we call one of those risky or we're vulnerable there at our lockouts. It sounds like it is one, so.
Yeah, and our township committee has done an amazing job of actually getting people to approve ground to sky pruning of these trees, which has helped a lot.
Oh, yeah,
And this is one area that you may want to look at closely.
I'm going to, yes.
And the second thing I just wanted to mention, you had mentioned that you have plans in place, to improve the reliability of power distribution. What are you doing, like telecommunication, Colin, you were in telecom, I see some other people here that come from telecom background. Telecom always has redundancy plans in place. So if equipment goes down, there's always a backup battery, a backup system to take over until to provide continuity. Is there anything that can be done with redundancy with the JCP&L equipment? So we know that the PPAC substation has certain reliability issues providing power to here. In the PPAC substation, can it be somehow be a backup to provide redundancy for when that goes down?
So that's the Greater Crossroads substation. And that's exactly what I was, I think, discussing with that individual with the loop schemes, because essentially what would happen is if PPAC breaker opened up, like we did, like I discussed earlier, that seems to be what's happening. Then this within a matter of minutes, the smart devices would operate, and then instead of you guys being fed from your normal source, you're now, fed from source B. Right. So there is our redundancy. We have redundancy built into our system in various ways, but we obviously need to be more redundant.
Well, and I just know you're probably going to see there's JCP and L's been here in front of our residents, in front of the township committee for years. Okay. I mean, we've had everybody from Henry Posey, Tom Haynes, Carol Bianchi, Robert Walton from Forestry, Yolanda Menziax. Sorry if I can't pronounce her last name correctly. But they've been coming here for years, telling these residents the same story over and over again. And now you're here, a whole new group of people. What are you going to do that's any different than what we've been told for the past several years?
I mean, for starters is, and I can't speak to them and the names that you mentioned, I think I only heard one that's an actual engineer that worked with the engineering group, which would be Henry. But from our commitment, my commitment is for me to you guys is that again these solutions that we're looking into, these attainable solutions, that's the key here. Okay, there's been plenty of solutions that we may have come up with in the past that just were again these larger scale things that really it just becomes an easement, environmental issue or a right-of-way issue, and it doesn't help the customers for years and years and years. Installing a couple sectionalization devices to do exactly what you just described when PPAC sub trips out and we have to put you guys on Greater Crossroads. Nobody needs to go out and do that. It will do it itself. You won't even, in many cases, if the system is configured properly, your clocks won't even reset. That's what we're going for. So, how are we different than the other people that came here over the last few years? Well, some of the technology is more readily available. There's some, it's become more attainable. We have them. The supply issue that we're experiencing, thankfully, hasn't really been too much with those pieces of devices and other things like that. And again, I've been with First Energy for, I don't know, it's close to 20 years at this point. And I've been in operations most of my time and, you know, I switched over to engineering because I was one of the architects of this improvement, infrastructure improvement plan, where I literally spent 2 years just trying to study what plagues different circuits. So this time now I'm in charge of engineering after going through that exercise. So the commitment is a little bit different because now like the background is just forever imprinted in my brain from spending the last 2 years going through. But the challenge is, you know, what the reliability solutions that we have to come up for with you guys might be significantly different than the reliability solutions for other people. Like I mentioned earlier, it's typical for us to come up here and tell you it's all trees, but in your instance, it really is. I mean, trees are a factor, there will always be, but it's not your driver.
No, but you were telling us that 90% of North Jersey outages do tend to be vegetation. So
I think I gave the quote about it and said it's, it's a one particular storm.
Well, I did say that, though. That's an accurate statement. 90% of North, but I'm talking North Jersey in general. Like you saw Bob's map where it showed the shading of the tree. We have that whole area. And here, if you notice, it's a little bit lighter here. There's a lot more highway traffic, you know, it's a different geography here than it is, say, up in Newton, Dover, Flemington district. So that is the differences here, and that is continuing what plagues us. Now, it's the off right-of-way trees that are really bothersome, and you know, I guess in general, you know, public may not understand that, you know, JCP&L doesn't want the trees to fall down. In fact, it's kind of hitting us in multiple ways. So we get dispatched to go out there, we have to pay to clean it up, we have to pay to put it back up, and the whole time this is all happening, your meters aren't spinning. And at the end of the day, it's trees that we can't even trim because they're off right away. We can't touch them.
Approval and approach the customers that actually.
And that's what's great about our township committee, is that they have to work closer with the residents to get the approval from the ground to sky. Pruning up the vegetation.
Perhaps that's why we're not here talking about trees predominantly. Right. So,
Well,
and
to Rich's point, a lot of the trees on that PPAC or coming from the PPAC substation, not in Bedminster. Our friends up in PPAC.
let me take that back too, because again, as I told you at the beginning of this, sometimes there's things that we just can't see from behind a computer desk, and sometimes there's things that aren't elevated up to engineering from our operations, and so we get that from, you know, tidbits from the customers in meetings like this. So it's very much appreciated, and definitely we'll take it back to the team.
But so basically, if anybody is heading out of here from JCP&L and heading north on 206 back to Chester or anything in that area, just look on both sides of the road for the next 2 miles.
Yeah.
And you'll see what I'm talking about.
Telephone still has trees on the wire. I saw them 3 spots on Telco's wires. There's 3 broken trees bending the wire in half.
Yeah, so again, low hanging fruit, easy fixes, it's something to put on the radar. Or at least mention to forestry.
Yeah.
Looks like our batteries, dying.
Most people have never needed a.
Well, we're gonna need you because we got folks out there and we are recording you. So Robin is gonna direct you.
People can, I know everybody can hear me.
No. Well, here, let's go over there.
Okay. My name's Gordon Wormstitch, at Heatherwood Lane in Bedminster. If I saw the slide right, you had one of the substations noted 5 outages in the last 12 months. I forget which substation it was. That's not so bad. And then the PPAC one had 7 in the last 12 months. Of all the substations that service Bedminster, how many outages, and I may have missed this number earlier, I didn't hear. How many outages do we have in the last 12 months?
In out of all the townships,
Of all the substations that serve Bedminster.
I wouldn't know that until I'd have to go back and look at that. Because our circuits are, we do everything's by substation. The problem is your substations trends, you know, they're sometimes not just in one town.
Okay, so I saw 7, I saw 5, so I know at least 12, probably more than that.
Oh, there's probably.
My question on that is, are there any neighborhoods or areas of Bedminster that get all 12 or 19, whatever the number may be? Or are they always going to be different? Does anybody get bad luck and they're just always on the outage?
Most likely not, but I don't want to tell you that. That doesn't ever occur. It could.
People back here all the way.
Yeah, so
they get them all.
It could be. And again, as I mentioned before, when I did a sample population today, now this is just going back, not the last 12 months, but to the beginning of the year, when I did six homes in the Hills neighborhood, but just any of those six, it was the breaker at the sub that operated. So everyone on that whole circuit would be affected. That's what we have to stop happening. That's going to be the best reliability fence. And we're going to come up with some solutions that's going to try to help mitigate that.
Number two, about 4 months ago or so, there was an outage and it came back on, but it came back on like I'm flicking my light switch about 15 times. On, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. Right after that, like that day, the next day, the motherboard on my clothes washer fried, which I'm assuming came from that. Since each one of those outages was less than 5 minutes, even though there were maybe 20 of them, do we know what caused that response in trying to solve the outage that was like a strobe light, they're on and off as quickly like that? 15 times.
I was just gonna say, it's cycling on and off, it's a piece of equipment that is attempting to restore the circuit back to its original functionality. That reset on, off is that equipment operating, but I don't know specifically if that's either at the sub or a piece of equipment that's out on the distribution.
Is that's, I mean,
Right, yeah.
I'm no electrical engineer, but that's a huge problem for everybody working at home with their computers on, with their phones on, with their appliances. And that's subject to, if it doesn't fry it there, it might wear it out sooner. And you guys are looking at really no proof, except I had one that happened on the spot. Because I had the guy working on it.
Well, so no, I appreciate that because again, as we started and we talked about, I think the difference between momentary and sustained outages, I had indicated that there were only, it's a different sample data set that we go to for the momentary outages. And if there's, some abnormalities happen like you're talking about, this is how we learn about it. So I'd like to probably, I'd like to dig into it. I mean, I'll need your information, like your address or whatnot. You can tell me after we're done with this, and I'd like to look into that. And then it sounds like a couple other people back here were affected, so.
Could it just been
It's supposed to do it a number of times and not keep going to the
Yeah.
vent. That sort of, it's like, it's supposed to say like, okay, the fault didn't clear.
I would hope so.
I'm gonna keep the breaker open.
Right.
Like at the sub, like the smart equipment there.
And it was well into double digits.
Gotcha.
Last one, and shame on me for not being at home and seeing your response. I'm sure there was a response, but the blue sky outage about 3-4 weeks ago on a Monday morning, like about 7 in the morning. I was one of the first cars at the 202, 206 River Road exchange and the light was out. That was really interesting, fun. Glad you guys weren't there pulling me over, because I was a little aggressive.
We got there a few minutes after.
I'm sure. I could be, because you guys have to be there. Do we know what that one was? I was on the road, so I didn't get to check my Facebook and all that like I usually do. Do you know what that outage was?
I think that was motor vehicle, but I can't be sure because they all run one into the other.
Yeah, and there certainly was a motor vehicle
I think-
issue, and I don't even remember if the incident was in Bedminster.
I just-
Former fire.
That was the most recent one. That was a couple weeks ago, but you're talking about
No,
it.
that's 3-4 weeks. On a Monday.
That took the whole lights.
Yep,
Yeah.
I remember that.
That one was a carpool, we're saying, it was a carpool accident?
No, one was a squirrel took down a line or transformer in P-PAC, which was the most recent one, probably 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that was several weeks ago.
Yeah.
That is probably the same one.
Yeah, you're probably right. Like I said, they all run one into the other.
That'll be the squirrel again.
Is this working now? Hi, I'm Jerry Cohen, Quailbrook Court. And I agree with everybody that's spoken, and Gordon, to answer your question, I think our street got all 12, if not 100. So it's definitely a problem. I also agree with what Jeff and Rich have said as well. And I don't work for JCP&L. I have a completely different career. However, I will say the vegetation management has been discussed with us at least 8 meetings. It's still an issue. 4 years sounds ridiculous, like what Rich was saying. The 5-minute momentary versus sustained not being considered as an outage is ridiculous, because there's dozens of those that apparently are not being recorded by JCP&L. And the smart meters are well overdue, but the one really big problem, we're all on Facebook, most of us are on Bedminster Buddies. And a couple of people have posted on there, thinking of buying a house in Bedminster. And they are met with a comment that says, don't buy in Bedminster because JCP&L sucks. What do we do about that? That is how severe this problem is. So I'm not asking because I'm not a technical person, but I think that JCP&L needs to understand the severity of the problem and how this can affect us and our property values. So I don't know what.
Great question.
I don't know what anybody has to say in response to that. I mean, I'm basically agreeing with everything else has been said, but I think having a public statement on Bedminster Buddies, which is on Facebook, not to live here because of power outages is bad.
Good evening. I'm Brandon Petrock. I live on Cortland Lane. I know we've been talking ad nauseum about outages. Are other incidents being taken into consideration for upgrades? I don't know if you're familiar, but we've also had a lot of power surges, probably due to the equipment being old, probably like the capacitors being old, the underground wires being old. To piggyback on what some of the other people have said, you know, we've had those surges have caused issues with HVAC systems, appliances, where like I'm not having a power outage, but instead I'm having my HVAC system not working when it's freezing cold or super hot. Are those types of things being considered along with outages for where the upgrades need to be made? Since I know we talk a lot about outages.
So can you describe the power surge?
So I had my HVAC system go out, and when the techs came and also my electrician came, they were showing that my house was receiving like 252 volts, which is, you know, obviously way too high for what we're supposed to be receiving, you know, since we're supposed to be on 240. Yeah, we're getting like readings of 252, 253 happening at certain times of day. And obviously, you know, pieces of equipment can't handle that, you know, that it seems to have righted itself. We had a lot of work, you know, we had a lot of calls in. We've had multiple people come out. We've tried different things. The most recent solution was they turned off one of the capacitors. I think the closest one to the hills itself. But again, I know that seems like a temp fix. So is, I guess my other question is, will the new equipment rely less on things like that?
No, capacitors are used for a completely different reason altogether. So I'd have to go and look at it. And kind of, it's actually interesting to me to figure out what is going on. And that's where I nerd out, you know, and try to figure that stuff out, because I too have those issues sometimes in my house. I you know, like we go through and we get to looking at them, we get to look at the issue. Again, I'd be happy to take your information down and try to, you know, make sure, because my engineers would be the ones that do the voltage investigation. I guess you said you called in before.
Yeah, I forget the engineer's name. My wife knows who it is, but
I have that information for you because we worked a long time with this customer, literally months. What he's describing is, I think, is an overvoltage condition that exists throughout Bedminster.
Okay.
I've even seen it in my house. I know, Robin, you've experienced it as well. These are different circuits where, for example, my voltage might run up from 120 to 132, 136. I know 5% is acceptable in terms of voltage variations, but you'll suddenly see voltage spikes. Or in this gentleman's condition, he had a consistent overvoltage situation, which I think the local line shop came out. It pulled a capacitor from one of the transformers. But I think holding that consistent voltage, and I know there was some investment made by JCP&L, I guess within the last several years, to try to regulate that voltage, or it's part of the filing you've done for Circuit of the Future. But we've suffered over voltage in a variety of places here in Bedminster over the last several years.
And I just want that to be considered, again, we talk a lot about outages, but there's other issues, that are, and especially with, I do a lot of things with appliances and stuff, and these newer systems can't handle the over voltage. They just can't.
Yeah.
So, and that hurts a lot of people because, you're buying new equipment, you're spending time waiting for your HVAC system to be fixed. Where it's not necessarily, an outage, I'm sitting here in the dark, but it's other things.
So when you say you've dealt with it, is it's been multiple customers complaining or is it one section of customers complaining?
It's multiple customers in different locations, this
Times.
at different times, but no, for example, I don't live in the hills. And I will see voltage spikes that will go, like I said, to 135 and it's only dropped to 105 and then spike back up and it'll flag back and forth and then it'll settle down.
How are you measuring that?
I have a voltage meter on an audio equipment. And it's persistent because I have a couple of them throughout the house and all of a sudden they'll go into an alarm state because you're getting high over voltage.
And usually like sewer pumps or like pump houses and things like that. That's the same thing.
They will alarm and start screaming. Right.
One of the things that happens in my place, and I'd like to give you guys my information too, is with any rooms with incandescent lights, I've noticed in the last year or two that the lights flicker a lot. Up and flicker, no matter what bulbs are in there. And I'd like to have somebody come and look at that for me.
Is it happening with incandescent light bulbs?
Well, sometimes even with others, but I mean, it never used to happen until maybe about a year or so ago. Somebody's like the power is not consistent. And I think it's somewhat related to what he's saying, Colin's saying. So I would like to have somebody come and check that out.
With the type of bulb though.
Well, I understand that, but if I take it, I mean, even with the LEDs, sometimes I notice.
And a lot of compliance.
Right. Right, exactly. I've got a new house in our clubhouse too, but I'd like to have somebody come look at our labs, where I'm not that far away from them, so.
But it just, people throughout the house, something else.
Well, if anything that's incandescent, I notice instantly. I don't even have that many incandescent bulbs. But those are the ones I noticed. So.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the info.
Okay, if there's no more questions here in Town Hall, Robin. For everyone participating via Zoom, if you have a question of the JCP&L delegation.
I have a question.
Here, everyone needs to stay on mute. If you're not on mute, put yourself on mute. To be announced into queue. Once again, bring your cursor down to the bottom, click on reactions, click on raise hand, and then Ms. Ray will cue you in to take you off mute. So Robin.
I'm gonna go in order. Fred P, I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself.
And it's the same direction. Your name and street, please.
Hey, guys, thank you. Fred Pucciarelli, Hills Drive. I think everybody, including the panel and the audience, has asked a lot of the questions that I had, but I do have a quick 4 questions. And I'll start with the segue question that just led into what the gentleman in the blue was talking about earlier about studies. What is the likelihood of this project succeeding with the feasibility study that you performed over the last 2 years? Meaning, is the $800,000 of this infrastructure going to succeed or not? Or are we just throwing stones at it and we're just going to guess as we go along?
So
I haven't seen any data or charts, so it would be good if you could give us a visual of how is this going to be, or how are we going to be guaranteed that this is going to succeed?
So the investments that are made from the 2 projects that we had laid out are investments to basically, again, lay the runway for us to start building the circuit of the future design to be able for us to handle the ampacity and the capacity for other circuits to support adjacent circuits, which is really the driver for what we need to be at to create that redundancy that we're talking. So these projects in and amongst itself will provide some reliability benefit, yes. But we really need to really build the sectionalization, come through and really, do the things to the circuit that we need to do in order to basically create the redundancy, create the sectionalization, and create what we're calling those premier operating districts. In a URD, it's a little bit different, and I don't know if you're associated with the hills or not, but in a URD, it's a little different. And again, we're going to need some other solutions to go through to create other circuit ties, other areas to be able to network the circuits together. And again, the achievable ones I tackle ASAP. Those are the ones where the overhead conductors kind of meet another substation source or circuit before it feeds the URD. There's about 2 or 3 locations that we've identified that we're going to need to go ahead and put pen to paper on.
So Shauna, if we look at that specific to the hills, right? So we know there are sections of the hills that are fed by the PPAC substation, other sections fed by Greater Crossroads. So we work with the 2 where you've got money deployed or ready to be deployed. Do you have the ability to make that loop outside of the URD area?
So that's exactly when I say will provide us the runway to do that, that's exactly it. It's the ability to make the loop possible. So what we don't want to do is if the section of the hills fed from PPAC then trips, it's now fed from Greater Crossroads, but that circuit can't handle the extra load now that's not normally on it. If we don't do these projects that we're talking about now, we won't have the ampacity in the conductors to be able to take on those loads.
And how right now for those 2 lines, right? Because that's where the money's being deployed. So therefore, presumably that's the first loop that you construct. Do they interconnect? Do they intersect right now?
Those 2
above
circuits,
ground?
yes.
Is that where is that? I don't know how much you can tell us, but I presume that's somewhere on 202, 206 outside of by the entrance into the hills.
So I don't have the intersection, that's not coming to me. I mean, I stare at these maps today for so long, but I don't have the road names, but there's a few intersections where the circuit's tie points, so to speak, that we'd be looking to, again, try to leverage, so to speak.
And does that involve, from our perspective, looking at it, do you need to expand your east mains? Is there other infrastructure that needs to or property rights that need where the town can help?
Yeah, there may be.
Okay.
And I'm having those discussions with municipalities that are receiving other funding for things like that. So if that is the case, we will come back.
Okay.
One of the things that we're trying to target is the things that are easily attainable, and from just the headache that some of that has been, we're trying to target certain, like when I say we're looking to leverage those ties that are already there, it's because that's infrastructure that's currently existing. So we could easily make some small manipulations to it to affect that change, where we don't have to sit there and reconduct or through an area of wetland or through, so that's what we're trying to avoid. That's why, again, I don't have the graphs and charts as this individual is asking about for those solutions, because we're just beginning to put pen to paper on those. And again, as we're more getting involved with the automation, and that's kind of where we're going with our circuits.
And then these are proven technologies. So to Frank, I didn't get your last name, but to Frank's point that will this work? This is a proven technology.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. We've had so I forget what our last actual numbers were, but when we have certain storm related activities, we create reports and we send to the Board of Public Utilities, and there's a section in there which we have in there, it's called system resilience. We accent some things on how the system operated because of the benefits that we've done lately to the system. And actually we accented there's a storm in the summer, I forget what it was, but we actually took into consideration to loops. And we looked at how many times they operated and how many customers they helped avoid a sustained outage. And it was something like 10,000 customers. It was, significant. So, we are looking to not only just put these fixes in place, we are monitoring these circuits for some time afterwards to ensure how well they're operating. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to fix all of your problems. I can't do that, but I can tell you once we put these improvements up, we are going to be monitoring how well they're hitting the mark. And if they're not hitting the mark, we
Frank, you
Well, maybe,
got a couple additional questions?
yeah, I'm gonna finish it up real quick because I know everybody else has their hands up. So I'm gonna ignore a lot of my questions, but I think the most important was in either slide deck 1 or slide deck 2, it was very broad. It just said reduce outages. Can we know what percentage of reduction that's gonna bring to the community when it comes to reduction of outages, rather than just saying reduce outages?
You know what, there's so many outside influences that can affect the system that that's hard to project that, but Sean's team definitely does, like you were just explaining, they will go measure what the investment made, what was the benefit of it. So because the system is just, I mean, it's not predictable, you know, a storm coming through or weather, there's just so many factors involved.
You know, if you,
There should be a verification or validation of this hardware devices to let us know what the reliability is gonna be, which therefore would point to the reduction of outages. But that's it for my questions, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
and Fred, that's a fair question, and, you know, look, you know, we're just trying to be transparent and direct with the general public, and again, you know, we're not gonna tell you you're never gonna have an outage again after we put up these boxes. It's just, you know, I'm not gonna commit to that because it's just probably certainly untrue. So that's why we're using.
There should be a target though. At least give us a target and then you guys could work off of that.
So we have targets in our reliability benchmarks throughout the, you know, the system as the system performs. And you know, we're always considering how we're looking at it on a per circuit level or per system-wide level. Right now, we're judging ourselves right now on a system-wide level. And you know, obviously, you know, when we look at what reliability benefits will we gain from the investments that we're making, once we finish kind of putting pen to paper, we'll have an idea of what we expect. But again, that's an engineering assumption that we typically don't publicize because again, you know, just to be completely transparent with you, you know, I can't sit up here and tell you you're never going to have a power outage again. You know, so we have an idea where we want to be in terms of metrics, but you know, as soon as we say to you, hey, we're gonna get 80% of your power outage, you're gonna get reduced. Next year, we're gonna get hit with like, you know, like three level, you know, 3 storms or whatever, and we get walloped, and then that's out the window. Because I told you before, we're getting away from, oh, that's storm or that's this, or that, you know, it doesn't matter. It's about what the customer's experience in general. So, you know, and part of the circuit of the future, we use the phraseology of storm hardening because it will harden the system to stand up a little bit better in storms.
Okay, Robin, you want to,
Yes, I'm next. I'm gonna ask Robert Sherrill to unmute.
Hi, it's Robert Shirley from Edgemont Lane, and I wanted to ask about the underground primary wires in the hills. In a 1-month period this summer, we had 2 of those fail, resulting in over 35 hours of outages. The first one was July 10th, and that was a 9-hour outage, which seems excessively long for a primary failure to work around it. The second one was on August 9th, and because you had not made permanent repairs from the first one, you weren't able to work around that, and that outage was 26.5 hours. 2 weeks after that, in the next neighborhood over, didn't affect me, there was another primary failure in Stone Run, and that one still has not been affixed. That one was August 22nd. So we've had 3 failures in the same area in 6-week period of time. We also had 1 fail, I believe it was back in 2020. So my questions are, why are these lines failing? They're 40 years old direct buried cable. Why does it take over a month to make a permanent repair? You know it failed, you know the solution, but nothing happens for over a month. And is this something that JCP&L should be proactively replacing to avoid additional failures?
Yeah, I know some of the details. I don't know about the most recent one. I don't think I got that from you yet. And I don't have confirmation that that's not repaired. But we can get that. But there is
redundancy in terms of the underground. I believe the Hills has portions that are fed from both directions. So we had that first fault, as you mentioned, in June. We had given it to our underground contractor, E&M, to make the repair. They're the ones we use for these. I did not think it was a month between the two. I thought it was a week.
No, it was about a month.
No, this was July 10th.
The first time it went out?
July 10th was the first 9-hour outage, and then August 9th was the 26.5-hour outage.
Okay. I'd have to look into the July one because I don't think I have record of that. And that was
This is within Knollcrest, between the pad transformers in Knollcrest. And because the first one failed and you're able to backfeed around that one, when the second one failed, there were 2 transformers that had no power at all.
That's when you and I were talking on that Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, that one I specifically remember. Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, as Sean said in the beginning, underground repairs are obviously the most lengthy. They take time. We have to call and make sure we're not going to hit other utilities. Direct bury is its own other hard issue to get through, but typically, I mean, again, I can't speak for certain in terms of Bedminster. In my home district, usually underground repairs are within, a few days. We are preparing it for anticipating severe weather. It may move up and down in the schedule. They're a contractor that we use that does a lot of our underground repairs. So I don't know the cause of the one in July. I do know the one in August, but we hadn't repaired the first feed for in between those 2 pad mounts before the second fault happened. It's just unfortunate. I did try and get in front of it as much as I could to give advance notice to the governing body to get to the residents that it was going to be, 12 or 14 hours, but I can't really speak on why.
Bob, just for the rest of the audience and for the other members of the TC, can you describe the situation that Mr. Shirley is discussing? So when he talks about the primary, can you just explain what that means for the folks out
Yes,
here?
so in default to you if I'm saying something incorrectly, but the pad mount is underground transformer that we use for underground development, green metallic box. And typically most of the neighborhoods I've encountered in my territory is dual feeds for them, so they're fed that. A big issue I have currently in one of my municipalities is Verizon running new fiber, and they're using a bullet. I think it's a bullet something. I can't remember. That's the name of it. It's a device that basically just shoots their own. The primary, the secondary, got street lights out, gas main, things like that. So sometimes we have contractors who do curbing and stuff like that, et cetera, that they can impact our equipment. But for this one specifically, what we had happened was there was a piece of an underground cable that had faulted. The crews that went out and responded, they isolated the fault between those 2 pad mounts and fed it via a different feed. So just a different direction is coming from it, still the same amount of power. In that moment, I think I thought it was a week after, I may be incorrect with my dates, but the next storm that we had, it went fault again. Not sure the cause as well for that one either, but essentially then the area between those 2, they had faults on either of the circuits, so there's no feed for them to get that until the underground repair is done, which is involved direct burying all new brand new cable between those 2 pad mounts.
Clarification of Mr. Shirley's question. Is anybody doing anything quietly?
Yeah, it would help if you could talk into the microphone because it's very difficult to hear you. The questions again were, why are they failing? Why does it take over a month to make a permanent repair, although you mentioned that's a scheduling issue? And is this something that you guys should be proactively replacing?
Yeah,
I mean, there are a number of factors which would cause us to preventatively replace, underground cable. And again, that's kind of the problem with URDs, right? They're prettier, they're out of the way, and inherently they will have more robust reliability. But when things start to fail, especially if it's direct buried cable and it starts to fail, it does make it more difficult for us to look at it or prevent it Why it took 36 hours or whatever, how long you said that outage was, we're gonna have to go back and take a look at that. Probably a number of reasons, and we can look into that, but you know, it's kind of just the issue with the underground cable. I mean,
Sean, then this discussion goes back to, I think, Renee's point earlier. You know that the infrastructure is aging. It's going to fail. The Hills was built, 40 years ago. And most of these associations were built within that time frame. So it's all going to happen. It's all going to happen in the next, 4, 5, 6 years. Is the failure a binary, it's working or it's dead? Or are there other metrics that you can assess this line is deteriorating and it's got another 6 months? And that you can proactively make those repairs before they take these neighborhoods down?
there are a variety of ways that we can do what we call asset analytics. That's what we have a whole group that kind of looks into that. Age of the conductor is obviously one of those contributing factors. I don't have a number for like a mean time before failure of a cable. I don't have the number of, what are the symptoms of a cable that's failing or, or going or about to fail. Typically we see connectors at the transformer fail, we see connectors at an egress fail. For a cable to just fail in the middle of the span, it happens. But again, it's very difficult for us to see or prevent if we just go by, okay, 40 years of age, we're going to replace everything, right? That's a lot of cable in a lot of areas and a lot of work. So we do have asset analytics, but there's nothing we would say that says, hey, that cable is going to fail in 4 years. I have no data that would say if it's 44 years old, it will fail. But the probability of failure as things get older, obviously, it probably increases.
I would say a lot of the underground faults that I have, my main territory are dig-ins or not just cable fault. There's some culprit that caused the issue.
Yeah,
I don't know if this, I don't think.
Yeah, the concern here is right. These were not, these were just, so we had, Rich Costa mentioned before, those wood duct, we had 3 lateral failures in the span of, Rich, give me what, 6 months? We had 2 back to back, a month apart, and another one that failed another month later. 6 months later. Here in Knollcrest, you've had 2 primary failures within a month, and then we had another primary failure probably January of 2023. So that's, again, is there a causal relationship? Who knows? But it's a concern now, given the age, as Mayor mentioned, of the hills. Is this going to happen more and more? Is there something that needs to be done to proactively address it?
Yeah, so what I would say to this is that, the cables are going to fail, but there's redundancy built into the URDs that you should just be able, as Bob was saying, fed from an alternate feed. And if there is no alternate feed, typically you're going to have a prolonged outage, 3 to 10 hours probably, because they have to dig up the cable, replace whatever it is. The longer outage he was speaking of, we probably have to go and look at that.
It was, it was just two separate underground faults that occurred at the same time.
So I think this is a little bit of an extenuating circumstance. Typically, when we put our URDs in there, we are expecting a cable to fail at some point in time, and that shouldn't have a large effect, or no customer should be outage for over a day. That's not the intent. So
yeah, you say you have redundancy, but when it takes you over a month to make a permanent repair, during that entire month or 5 weeks or 6 weeks, you don't have redundancy. So the only way you can actually have redundancy is to make the permanent repairs as quickly as possible.
Agreed.
You're not doing that.
Yeah, Bob, I don't get that.
Yeah, that's okay.
I appreciate that feedback, and again, I can understand the frustration as we're longer outages.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for coming here, and thanks for answering, discussing my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shirley. Robin?
Next, Mayor, we're going to have Lisa Robinson. Lisa, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Hello, Lisa Robinson. I live on Larkspur Court. So a couple things. First, thank you for coming and talking with us tonight. I want to speak first, piggyback on equipment. I just want to make it known here too that Colin Hickey worked with me for probably 4 to 5 years to get a box replacement that was severely, I'm going to call it a transformer box, but I don't think that's right. But a box that was severely rusted, had a lot of holes in it. It was actually becoming a safety issue. Animals could get in it. Children could put their hand in it. It took almost 5 years to get a simple green box replaced. Countless emails. I think it probably would still be broken if Colin hadn't helped me. At the time, though, to be fair, it was over COVID. So they did, you guys said that there was problem to get parts and everything through, that during that time, which a lot of people had that problem. But I would think, knowing that you have some aging communities, that a few replacement parts, such as something that's standard as a box, would be kept on hand. It shouldn't take 4 years to get 4 to 5 years to get a piece of equipment, something that simple. So what I see, and I'm not trying to beat you guys up, I'm really sorry, but I see more reactive than proactive with JCP&L. I know you have a scheduled maintenance for overhead lines, and other things. I don't see that happening. I'm going to tell you, I never see a JCP&L truck here just proactively looking around and checking equipment. I know there's a schedule. We've been told this many times. This is like 5 years of meetings with JCP&L, if not more, and things don't change. Now, I know you have a plan that you discussed before, and I did miss the first few minutes, so I apologize. But I guess we've been having this conversation live. We've had meetings. I just don't understand why it's taken 4 to 5 years for you now to come back and say, okay, here's now what we're going to do. This should have been being worked on when we first started communicating all of our issues. All of these people who have been inconvenienced for years. And as Jerry Forte said, we now have a reputation for having unreliable power grid in Bedminster, and people don't want to buy homes here. It's extremely unfair to the residents. The other thing is that I am actually also the president of the HVMA Master Association. So I have to be concerned about our amenities. This summer, we had a lot of problems with our pumps and our filters at the pools because of the power failures and the surges. They affect our filtration equipment. Every time one of those things happen, the pool pumps go out for a while, and it's very hard to get them reset. We also have electronic gates for the homeowners to go in and out of, and it affects the gates. The gates will either not lock, or they'll be stuck closed and we can't get in. So if it doesn't reset itself, which a lot of times it hasn't, we've had to make numerous calls this summer to the vendor to come out and look at our gates. We've had to install surge protection, had somebody come in and do surge protection on all of our office equipment, which was being affected. I can't prove it, but I think that, this dimming on and off in my condo, with the lights between that and the power going on and off and flickering of the power, it fried the board in my refrigerator. So I had to buy a new refrigerator last year. There's just been ongoing things, and it's not fair to the residents. So I just wanted you to know that, that these are affecting customers in many ways. And also, it's not fair when we have to close the pool because we don't have filters that aren't working, the gates aren't working. And so that's affected, the amenities as well. So I just wanted to, just put those things out there just to reiterate how this is affecting us. And we've been very patient with JCP&L for many, many years, but, patience is wearing very thin with a lot of people. So and again, we're not going to get, our community's only aging. It's not getting younger. So we would appreciate if you could take that into consideration and do more proactive work instead of just being reactive. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay. Okay, next, Mayor, we have Patty. Patty, can you unmute yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Patty's husband. My name is Frank Sesta. I'm on Mountain Court. Brilliantly stated by Lisa Robinson. Some of this is redundant, but I've been sitting here listening and working hard on it, so I'm going to let it fly. With all due respect, and I'm sure you all realize that all the technical jargon and fluff in your presentation and all the promises sound really cool, but don't really mean much to lay people and residents. Most only care about all too frequent inconvenient impact on our lives. It clearly seems to most residents here that we have a significantly higher rate of outage occurrences than more heavily populated areas closer to the center of the anthill, if you will, with larger infrastructures that we have, like central Middlesex and Union counties that have PSE&G. Those areas also have squirrels, traffic accidents, fallen trees, etc. So it's hard to completely buy that reasoning. I have many friends still living there, and they all tell me that they hardly ever have an extended outage, and certainly no record that matches our frequency. So if it's primarily an infrastructure failure, why did JCP&L why didn't they take it upon themselves to proactively maintain the infrastructure, if that's possible, and not allow it to deteriorate to its current dire condition? Isn't that responsibility incumbent on your company? And lastly, do you know for a fact that all the calls from residents that reported rusted and compromised electric round boxes, as Lisa mentioned, as was requested by your young lady there in the last meeting, was that all definitely and diligently followed up on?
Yes, it was, right, Colin, when, after last meeting.
Yeah, so I think he's referring to Yolanta. So
Yeah.
there was an inspection done, at least my understanding, last year of all the equipment in the hills. I don't know the result of that in terms of what you guys determined, in terms of what needed to be replaced. That was not shared with us. The box in question was on Mountain Court in Village Green. That had, William Ross said that was something we'd asked for years. I understand part of it was a transformer, and the problem was a supply chain deficiency. But even after that kind of settled itself, we still had a heck of a time just getting that one box replaced. You've replaced a couple of switches in the hills over the last year as well. But I don't know where it stands with respect to your inventory management and what things need to be replaced in addition to what's been done to date. I just don't know.
I just recall her working very closely with some of the group associations.
The associations were basically
Yeah.
reaching out through me or directly to
Yeah.
her in some cases, basically documenting places where there was significant rust on the transformers, or in this case, the township committee identified a couple of switches that were in disrepair. But
So
they
we're
had,
not aware of anything outstanding.
and I don't know either, because I know there was an inventory done and they inspected all the boxes in the hills
Okay.
probably last year, but that was not shared with respect to what needed to be replaced and what was fine. I don't know.
Okay. And as far as the two projects that we identified earlier that Sean went over, those were done from his group. So that was identified, that was proactive. It wasn't like after a meeting, oh my gosh, we better do something. We're coming here telling you about solutions that his group identified. Let's make a difference here. Let's improve the customer experience. So we are being proactive, but we also are reactive when we get feedback. And that's what our team is doing.
No disrespect, folks, but I genuinely sense a strong degree of mismanagement here, and it leaves me very concerned for the residents of Bedminster.
Yeah. Well, I feel confident with Sean in this position. This is a new position that he has, and he has a great team, and he's challenging them to look at different avenues.
Thank you for my question.
Great job. Thank you.
Robin,
Mayor,
anyone else?
I have no other raised hands at this time.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the Township Committee. Any comments or questions?
I mean, a lot of this we have heard before. A lot of this, though, is updated information. And I think the one thing that's true that drives everybody, I always try to get the motivations, and you can't dispute the notion that they have every incentive to make sure the lines are up and running at all times. I mean, that's what they're in the business to do, is to provide power for a profit or whatever, at the BPU's ability to let you have a profit. But so I can't continually beat up the messenger who everyone's trying to work towards the same goal here, and that is to get consistent, good power source. I personally, I'm on the P-PAC line, I believe, because I'm up in that direction, but you know, my lights flicker as well. It just, it happens. I have noticed a big time improvement from when I first moved into now. Is it perfect? No. Do I feel like I've got more power outages than when I had when I was a kid? Yeah. But I don't believe for 1 second you guys are sitting back in corporate center and saying, let's figure a way to turn the lights out. So what do we do with that? Everybody's fighting for it to get to the same spot, and I get that the residents are frustrated, but I just can't. I don't know what the answers are other than to see the money pour in and the projects come in and see the improvements. I'm not hearing JC P&L say, you know, yeah, we're aware of your problems. We're just ignoring them. They're aware of what's going on. They're trying to fix them, and the residents are going to continue to let us know when they're not getting service. And this will probably continue, but I think it's a good thing. I mean, getting you here and listening, it's not just us saying it, it's the residents. You see, we've got a robust turnout. I think they're all appreciative that you're here. You see what they actually have these concerns. They're not making it up. Thank you for coming out and continue to do your hard work. And we hope that we get improved performance. I mean, what more can you say? Thanks to the residents for coming out and voicing their displeasure and their experiences and backing us. So when we say, hey, folks, come out, we've got problems. You see, we're not just saying this. We're not being, you know, fear mongers. This is real. This is an issue that Colin and primarily Colin, but you know, the TC has been handling for a while. So thank you.
We do hear it all, obviously. We get phone calls from the residents. We see Facebook posts. We're very familiar with a lot of the problems and the issues. So if there's information that we can provide to you with respect to questions you might have after the discussions tonight, questions or issues the residents have raised, we're here. We're ready to provide that because we want to get this problem solved, just as Doug said. It sounds like you guys have a plan in place to be able to start to address this, but it has been, I mean, it's not just ones and twos. This has been persistent for years now. And I think you opened with, you know, it was kind of got better for a while and then it's really got worse. Yeah. And the concern obviously we have is, you know, we look at the need for infrastructure investments, both at the substation level as well as the local level, the neighborhood level. And the concern we have is, as Mayor mentioned this, those neighborhoods are aging. So those investments need to be made because it's not going to get any better without that.
Well, it's not just that the infrastructure is aging, but also as the federal government seems to be putting greater emphasis on electricity for replacing heat and for every other, it's going to put more
pressure,
more stress on an already stressed situation.
Right.
And it requires infrastructure investment to keep up, and not just keep up, but to anticipate what's coming down the road.
Doesn't that mean you just go and you buy another like power strip and you just plug that into it? And then you have a whole,
You know what? Take one of those really thin lines and keep tying them together.
Daisy chain.
Yeah,
Great.
there you go. That's the word, daisy
Yeah.
chain.
I put my in-laws.
As long as you keep it away from the squirrel.
Yeah.
Mayor, we have, Lisa Robinson has her hand raised online.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just one final thing. Is there any way that we can get like updates or a check-in maybe in 6 months to see where you are with this, just so that we are all up to date with the progress? I just don't want to, you know, leave here tonight and then we don't hear anything. We really do need updates as to where things are. Is there a way that we can?
Lisa, we're going to address that at the end of this presentation.
Okay, thank you.
So Renee, Gina.
Just real quick, I do live in the hills right now, and I think our unit was built in 1985. And you can see, like, just through the whole neighborhood, that stuff is aging, and it is a little scary, but it's with all the utilities. It's not just the electric, but we don't have gas. So everything we do is electric, and we're all working from home right now. So when the thing flickers and my laptop goes out, I now have to reconnect back to my VPN, blah, blah, blah. And it's a pain in the neck. And I know a lot of our neighbors, they get a power out, it comes back, power out, it comes back. And that's a problem, especially if you're Zooming or Teamsing. It's unprofessional and it's just not right for your work. But that's why I mentioned when the, can we do more investigation of the older equipment? Because we know it's gonna go. We've already had it in some of the neighborhoods. So if there's a way of doing more frequent inspections, and I know you were trying to explain how you guys do it, but if there's a way to do it, and perhaps if there's a way to get some of those funds that are sitting at the BPU, get them earmarked for replacement of our local lines, because if you guys do all this work at the substation levels, but our lines to our house don't work, it won't matter what you do out in the substations. It's not gonna get in our house. But that's my 2 cents. But, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate all the stuff that you're doing. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I think the presentation was very informative, but I just feel like it's very redundant, and you were saying 2024 was one of the worst years. It's like it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And the way of the world today, people work from home. It's very inconvenient for our residents. And you know that, you hear what everyone's saying. It's not just about, people are annoyed or aggravated. It's affecting their daily lives. And so we were just asking, to maybe look into things a little bit further so that we can make the improvements necessary so it doesn't continue to get worse and worse, because it is 2024. I'm sure there's technological advances that have taken place and equipment, even though it's mechanical, I'm sure there's technology behind it that, can make improvements. But thank you for coming, and thank you to all the residents for coming and really just voicing. I think it's great to see how many people are affected, and also that care, so it makes it like a real human aspect to it.
So one of the things that we start off with is, thanking the JCP&L reps. For those who don't know, Bob Flynn is actually standing in as an interim, right? You're interim liaison. So lucky you get to inherit Bedminster on this temporary basis. Jackie are we getting a permanent?
Yes, we'll be doing that. We're in the process of making that move and the hiring.
So
process.
Bob's been great. Bob's been dealing with me and with Colin on weekends, middle of the night. But we understand that he also has another service area that he supports as well. So we'd love to have him because of his responsiveness. Colin,
no question.
Me on that.
Bob hasn't had a day off. Let's see, you
11 weekends.
11. And he picks up the phone at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday, and I will vouch for that.
Yep, and I'll vouch for those calls later that Saturday.
Yes.
But Bob, you did mention the loop presentation, and is that something that you can bring back? Is that a self-explanatory presentation?
So I mentioned that.
Oh, that was you?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean.
And no, I just don't want to, because Bob's probably glad I didn't say anything else. I can work on something. I mean, it's probably a very engineering based presentation. But I think I recall when we were out there doing like some show and tell about some looping and circuit fusion and stuff. I think one of my colleagues, I think she created a really good illustration. I'm gonna see if I can't dig that out and we'll put together a very high level presentation. It's worth noting. I mean, it's the stuff that's really like that's like the bread and butter that's gonna like really kind of help things.
Well, and I think what you heard from some, not all, but from some of the residents asking questions or giving comments is, how is this going to work?
Exactly.
Is there a quantifiable improvement? And the answer may be no, it's not quantifiable, but at least if it's demonstrable that it's been shown, this is how it works. It's simple engineering, it's simple physics. That's something that we can take back.
Yeah.
Okay. And you don't even, for that, you may not even have to come in person. You can do it remotely and just participate and do the presentation through Zoom. Okay.
Assuming the power's on.
Even though Bob lives only a few minutes up the road, so he could use it.
Come on, I had to.
And to a question that Lisa had, and which I was going to get to, is when we've had these presentations, this is not the end all, right? So this is, I want to say this is a new beginning, because we certainly don't see it that way. But there are, right, so there's commitment for the P-PAC substation, there's commitment for the Greater Crossroads substation. Both of which you anticipate will be complete by October,
By the end of the year.
by the end of the year.
It did say October.
It did on the, yeah, on the
Yeah,
presentation,
no.
it said October. So how do we continue this, right? So do we schedule for you guys to come back to the TC?
I will, as those projects complete, I will probably come back with the individual who will be the full-time rep to do a, hey, here's an update. And then also, here's the individual, and then we'll have some, hopefully, as you put it perfectly, it's, I mean, we have that one high priority circuit we're doing. The press release is very well written so that a regular resident can understand it. It's not like we're upgrading 3-phase to 2-phase, so we can, do this, that, like, it's in layman's terms enough that like, all right, I see this is gonna benefit us. So we'll do the same when we have these 2 projects as they complete. So, because they also, the other thing is they are, at least the one is the substation project that benefits not just this municipality, but surrounding as well. So it's tied in, it's a bigger project.
So I would say like, none of these are really what I would regard as substation projects. These are all just we just identify those circuits by the substation. That's all work being done on the lines.
Okay.
We're not doing anything. I think you.
Understood. Yeah, I think we asked a question before about whether the substation or line.
Just
So
wanna make sure that-
we're just identifying them by the substation,
Correct.
but it's line.
It's line work that we're doing. And, that's the first thing. And the second thing is, as we put pen to paper with these solutions, creating these loops, I do ask for a little bit of time. I know we have listened to a bunch of residents that said, we've been talking about this for a long time. We've been doing, a lot of different studies. There's been, certain things that, have plagued us over the last few years. And so what I'm asking for is just a little bit of time. In that time, as we complete these 2 other projects that we talked about, these spends that will conclude this year, what I recommend is, whenever you get with this team again, maybe we can give an engineering update on some of our attainable solutions that we talked about, such as those loops, and we can give you the update on where we're at, where we'll put those loops, where you'll see those bright shiny boxes up on the sticks, and hopefully what kind of benefits they'll provide you guys a little bit more. So
That works. Yeah.
So, Sean, does that mean you're coming back?
I mean, they'll.
He just lives off of 78. This is about as close as.
Yeah.
I think that's a yes.
I'll go get them.
I'm not too far from like Frenchtown area, so like I live in what we call the River District, and and I'll just tell you guys, I've heard a lot of frustration in the voices of the your townsfolk today. And I can appreciate it. I also live in a high priority circuit. My power does go out from time to time, more than I'd like to admit. And again, as JCP&L continues to, address a lot of these circuits, one of the reasons, and it's not an excuse, but one of the reasons why it does take time to do that is that, we cover like, what is it, like 44% of the state, something like that. I mean, we have, it's similar type reliability issues, in many different pockets for various different amount of reasons. And so we get it, we hear the frustration, but we can appreciate it, we're hopefully gonna be making some changes here, and that's just not with your township, but it's JCP&L in a whole, that infrastructure improvement plan that we filed, that $931 million is a lot, and that's capital that we're gonna be putting up front to get the work done. I mean, we're waiting and ready to make that commitment, but there's rules and regulations around those kind of improvement plans, and that's, we appreciate your support with that, because that there's a customer experience improvement that needs to happen, and it's going to happen. It's just a matter of a little bit of time. So we'll continue to update you guys. And I think the only thing out of tonight's presentation, or at least the feedback that I got from some of the customers, is the power quality issues, like all this flickering lights, all those things, like, because there's not really much on our system other than like voltage complaints that people have talked to us about. But again, some of the benefits I get from coming to these meetings is I hear that firsthand. I get to put some what I'm hearing to the system, what makes sense, what could possibly be solutions. And many times, hopefully, it's like, oh, there's a simple solution, or there's a seasonal cap, not a VAR control cap or something like that we can change. And because flickering lights, I don't know. I don't know why that would be caused. There's a variety of reasons we've dealt with flickering lights in the past, or unregulated or regulated voltage that have regulated voltage issues. So things that we need to learn about and address, and those again should also be corrected. That's not like a systematic problem, right? Because if it was, everyone in the town would see this issue. So we're gonna have to dial in on some of these locations, and
He's gonna be up all night thinking about this.
This is the kind of stuff that, like, Like my house is totally nerded out with like, voltage equipment, measuring every little thing,
Same.
yeah. So I get it, and I'm with you guys, and, again, I just need a little more time. We wanna, I have a great team. One of my engineers is, Gilberto, he's been on the call. He's listening in on this, because, he was the reliability engineer for this area for a while. And he's listening in because again, he's been with you guys for a few years now. And he's been messaging us on the side, so he's been taking some notes.
Seriously, yeah,
Good.
he does.
Yeah,
It's a great team.
he's been taking some notes, and so we're gonna,
We've been working with, I think, Bazan, is he on your team?
Mazan is also on my team.
Yeah, so he's familiar with some of the voltage irregularities as well around town.
I had a long couple hour conversations on this week. Yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah, we're fully aware, and Gil has kind of filled in for Mazan in most of Mazan's areas. Mazan actually moved into our planning and analysis group in the same for Flemington and the Washington districts. Gil has been the reliability engineer for Summit, and he's Flemington now. Yeah, he's Flemington. So Gil does a great job as well. So yeah, great team. So we'll be looking at this stuff, but I definitely appreciate all the feedback today.
Jackie, Sean, Bob, thank you so much for coming out.
you.
And we look forward to continued discussions and with hopefully positive
Yes.
results.
Yep.
So thank you. It is 9:30. We still have the whole rest of the meeting. So we're going to adjourn for 5 minutes. We will be returning, so 5 minutes.
Speak for yourself.
Gordon, you don't have to leave. There's a whole rest of the meeting ahead of you.
Can't wait for the rest of the
All right, so we'll, at 9:30, we'll adjourn.
Sure.
Okay, it is 9:40. We are back in session from the JCP&L presentation. Move on with the rest of the meetings. We don't have an approval of minutes. We'll have those at our next meeting. Permits and raffles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 permits and raffles, social fair permit for International Longshoremen's Association, local 1235, September 24 from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. at Fiddler's Elbow. A social fair permit for the Friends of the Clarence Dillon Library on October 13, 2024 from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Clarence Dillon Public Library. On-premise 50/50 raffle to benefit Friends of the Shelter, Inc. on October 24th, 2024 at 10:30 to 3 p.m., 10:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Hamilton Farm Golf Club. An on-premise merchandise raffle to benefit Friends of the Shelter, Inc. on October 24, 10:30 a.m. to 3 p.m. located at Hamilton Farm Golf Club. An on-premise merchandise raffle to benefit American Cancer Society, Inc. on October 14, 2024 at 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. located at Hamilton Farm Golf Club, and an on-premise merchandise raffle to benefit Cedar Hill School PTO on October 24 at 5:30 a.m. I can imagine that's p.m. to 9:30 p.m. located at Burnt Mills Cider. Any questions or comments regarding those permits and raffles? Seeing none, take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. Mr. Stevenson,
Hi.
Mr. Hickey.
We
doing a roll
did
call?
it. Yeah,
Oh,
we don't need-
sorry, all in favor. I'm
Aye.
sorry.
Oh, something had changed.
Monthly
No, that's
report
my fault.
discussion by Subcommittee Chair, Committeeman Stevenson.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. For DPW, just report back on a couple of the things we have going on. Jason and his team have installed the signs for the parking at the library. Working out at JVH, we got some issues with the septic system out there. We had that pumped. We've got some lines we've got to look at. We've got some of the missing fences and railing on the hike and bike over near AT&T. We got that up and running. And as far as gas meter projects, the one here at Town Hall is going to be completed on Thursday. And the line up in Old Stonehouse looks like that's been done. We just have to tap into the highway. So hopefully that's going to be done in real time next couple of days.
Oh, great.
So we got.
Great. So Jason, just following up on what Doug said, so this week, generator is
Thursday or Friday, they should have it hooked up. Then we just have to get it ran.
by fall.
So this building now.
We just need a storm.
We just need a storm,
Right.
You asked me.
Stop. Did you not just hear the last 2 hours?
But we have a generator, so now it'll never go out again. It's
All
like
right.
insurance.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Jason.
Talking about Old Stone House too, there is a little delay with it because I guess a lot more residents signed on. 8, 9, I think 9 more signed on to.
Funny how that happens,
Yeah,
Gina.
that happened.
Funny how that happens.
Ski Hill has listened to Mr.
Gina's
Brando.
neighborhood and Old Stone House, much more
If you build it, they
aggressive.
will come. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
If you build it, they will
Yep.
tap
Yeah, it
in.
got right up to the deadline where they could sign up. And something.
Actually, when they were coming around with that, I think it was 10 years, was it, Gina? They said for 10 years, anybody who pays to run the main line, if you will, there's a period of time, I believe it's 10 years, that
the
for
10
anybody
the
that
10-year buyback on the
taps in, you will see the money
Yep.
come back. So
Yep. Well, that's good news. It's really good news to see more people signed up for it. Thank you, Doug. Committeeman Hickey.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, all. Library, you and I have a meeting on Wednesday, Mayor. Just want to mention that the story walk around the community garden is open for parents and their young readers. So check it out. Kind of it's an experiential thing. You go around the garden, you stop at certain stations, you do a little reading. So apparently it's gotten a lot of good feedback, but we'll hear more on Wednesday. Board of Health, we have a meeting on Thursday, and the Board of Ed, I attended the meeting last Thursday. Ms. G expressed her sincerest appreciation for all the support the school receives from the town. Special call out to Jason and DPW for getting the school ready for the new school year, as well as to PD. Apparently there was an inadvertent triggering of the security system last week, and PD responded, and quote, the response was immediate, professional, and comforting. It was just an inadvertent trigger, a little human error, but PD was right on the case, so she wanted to give her many thanks from you guys for that.
It's a nice assembly of adjectives there. That's great. That's a really good.
No, that's Miss G. That's not me.
That's great. Thank you. Renee?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I have a JVH meeting on Wednesday, so I'll report after that. EC, it's a little quiet, but they did have someone from the farmer's market, one of the attendees, come up to Laura, who's one of the liaisons from EC to the farmer's market, come up and ask her about doing a special project on invasive species. They're very interested in forming a group and going around the town, and especially like on the hike and bike area, getting rid of some of the invasive species. So EC is going to look into organizing something with that.
Okay.
And that's all I got.
Okay.
Okay.
Fall Fest is coming up.
Yes, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. I'm only gonna report on Fall Fest, nothing else. None of the programs or anything, because we have a rec meeting tomorrow, so I'll have a better update next week. But Fall Fest preparations underway. It'll be held on Saturday, October 12th from 12 to 5 at River Road Park, and there's a rain date of October 13th. Activities include inflatables, harvest maze, petting zoo, pony rides, trackless train, hay rides, golf simulator, trailer. That's pretty cool. Pet show, emergency services demo, operating the DPW loader, which is a popular one, balloon twister, face painter, and more. We're going to be sending out an invite link to the Bedminster employees, commissions, and committees for volunteers for the event. And currently we have 28 businesses and organizations signed up to be exhibitors. And we also have about 15 sponsors. That's all.
That's great.
Thank you.
So once again, thank you to the rec committee and to Neil Mastrobuono for all the work you guys are putting into continuing to keep Fall Fest better and better every year. From my perspective, land use board, no meetings. We didn't have one earlier in the month. We don't have one, I think till October.
Right.
And even that may be in question. Library board meeting, you didn't mention that we have one coming up. Farmers market, we will be scheduling a farmers market committee meeting. This past week, broke 1,000 attendees again, which I thought was crazy. But folks keep coming out, so that was really great to see. Ag advisory. So we had a meeting last week of the Ag Advisory Board, and nothing, I can't give any specifics, but a project that I've been working on, I think since
late winter, maybe early spring. We expect to be in a position, maybe at our next meeting, to talk about preservation of a very notable farm on Lamington Road. We'll give a little more detail about that when it comes up, but it's roughly about 60 acres or so to be preserved, and a view shed also preserved. That's very important to folks in town, so that's great to see. And also the Ag Advisory, there was a endorsement for looking at another preservation, almost about a little over 100 acres, maybe 100, between 100 and 120 acres, depending upon how the exception area is furthered. And that memo has gone back and will be Beth Davison from New Jersey Conservation Foundation will continue those efforts and work with the homeowners to continue that process. And at some point, hopefully we can bring it to public. And let's see, that's all going to present it this time. Ms. Ray, please have the administrator's report.
Yes, Mayor. Just been working with New Jersey American Water on the new repeater shed agreement, which actually expired in 2019. There's been a lot of lag time in between communications, but we're on the right path now. We've already had our municipal attorney review the contract presented and the risk manager, so we should be moving forward relatively quickly. Miller Lane Pump Station Project, we have a joint stab and sewer utility meeting next Wednesday, September 25th at 6 o'clock. To review the project status with our engineer. Roof project, we've had a couple of project team meetings. We are pushing back our bid until October/November. A little bit of a going back and forth with construction and engineering on that project. Fall Fest project team meetings continue. We have one tomorrow. And just a couple of reminders, important election information on September 21st is when all the mail-in ballots start going out. So our drop box outside in front of the building will be opened on Friday. October 26th to November 3rd is early in-person voting. There's 6 locations throughout the county that people can vote Monday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 6. And October 29th is the deadline to apply for a vote by mail ballot. And lastly, November 4th is the deadline to apply for a vote by mail ballot in person. That's my report.
Okay, thank you. Lieutenant Polito, anything you want to report on community policing?
Sure. We had a coffee with a cop that was very well received down at Pottersville at the Black River Deli. I think we need to thank Bernie for supplying coffee and muffins. And that was run in conjunction with Tewksbury PD. We have another coffee with a cop scheduled for September 28th at the Bedminster Farmers Market.
Excellent.
And starting October 7th, I'll start our Essential Needs Fund Drive for veterans. That'll be hitting the website or our Facebook page on Friday.
Great. And Fall Fest, you guys are going to be all over. That's just community policing, right?
My cotton candy machine just came in.
Cotton candy with the cop. I like
I
that.
brought some tonight.
Should have made a cotton candy.
Yeah, we need a snack.
Sugar, that's just.
That's great. That is great. I do want to come back to something that I think we raised at the last meeting. So over the weekend, I did have the opportunity to talk with Congressman Kane about where we stood on his legislation to provide a funding mechanism for the local agencies who provide security assets at the request of the Secret Service. And then over the weekend, on yesterday, we had the incident down in Florida at one of the Trump golf courses. And I can only imagine that is certainly going to lead to additional requests. I don't know this to be the case, but that I certainly can imagine additional requests coming from the Secret Service directed at the prosecutor's office and Bedminster to provide additional support, especially around the perimeter of the golf course. This morning, I sent an email to Senator Booker's office asking for Senator Booker to sponsor or to serve as the Senate sponsor for Congressman Kane's legislation. I reached out to the woman from Congressman Booker, Senator Booker's office, who attended our meeting here a little over 2 weeks ago, and waiting on a response. Once again, between state police, prosecutor's office, and Bedminster, we're talking a fair amount of money. It's only going to be more. And, you know, I think what we talked about previously was, you know, given assassination attempt 1, assassination attempt 2, Secret Service calls and knocks on the door to the prosecutor's office and the Bedminster PD asking for local support. You have to respond. But there should be a mechanism to make sure that all the local resources, including the state police, prosecutor's office, and Bedminster, that we are reimbursed for supporting the federal government at DHS on those requests. So I will continue to update this as we hear back from both Senator Booker's office as well as Congressman Kane. We have no ordinances to introduce tonight, and we have no public hearing of ordinances. We have one item on the consent agenda. Unless anyone wants to pull that up for individual consideration, take a motion to approve resolution number 2024-124 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Ms. Moreski.
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez.
Aye.
And Mayor Jacobs.
Aye.
Thank you.
We do have one resolution for individual consideration. This is resolution 2024-122. This resolution authorizes the inclusion of Bedminster Township in the federal Highlands Boundary. Ms. Ray.
Sure, I'll give you a little explanation. In 2022, Congress reauthorized the Highlands Conservation Act and created a process for municipalities to be added to the region. And Bedminster is within that expanded region. And this, by authorizing Bedminster to be included in the federal Highlands boundary, it opens us up to some additional funding through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Most of the grants are cash match grants that require 50%, but it provides some additional funding sources for the township.
Great. And so what this, it's important to know what it does, but it's also important to know what it doesn't do. It doesn't mean that we are opting into the preservation restrictions under the State Highlands Act. This is merely just saying, yes, we acknowledge that we are in the federal Highlands boundary and therefore opens up grant opportunities for it. There's no harm or constraints on our property owners for us moving forward with it. Any further questions or comments?
No, I just was gonna thank you because that was one comment I thought was, okay, what is this? Is this sort of like, you know, the state says, gotcha, now you're in the Highlands and you're in the preservation or the planning or whatever it is. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. So you still get to expand your septic system if the Board of Health allows you.
So I got that going.
You got that going. So if there's no further questions or comments, take a motion to approve.
So
Second. Roll call vote again, please. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Ms. Moreski.
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez.
Aye.
And Mayor Jacobs.
Aye.
Thank you.
I think we've already signed off on the bill list, but we'll take a motion to approve the bill list pending review of individual invoices.
So moved.
second.
Roll call vote again, please. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Hickey?
Aye.
Ms. Moreski?
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez?
Aye.
And Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Thank you.
Any member of the Township Committee have anything they want to put up for discussion under new business? Seeing none, we'll go to old business, utilities. Right there, first and foremost.
You want to discuss more utilities? Good. We have no updates.
Okay, thank you. Pluckman Park Housing, John, Doug, anything you can discuss publicly or no?
I conducted an in-person site inspection. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Moving on. Somerset Hills Public Safety Committee. We had a Zoom conference last week with Mayor of Bernardsville, Mayor of Bernards Township, Mayor of Peapack Gladstone, Mayor of Far Hills, and the Mayor of Bridgewater, and me. And also Chief Bernardo and Chief DeCarolis from Far Hills attended as well. We talked about where we all stood on LPRs. Tom, I did give an indication to the other mayors that Bedminster is moving forward on purchase of 5 license plate readers. Not sure, I know you working with James on wrapping up the contract, not sure if you're.
I think my
Now it's with you?
my partner, John Szymanski, reviewed that and got back with comments this week.
He did, yes, and we've passed those on to the vendor.
You know, I asked Tom a question and I got 2 other people.
He's delegated.
So it's delegated, good. So is the anticipation that maybe at the next meeting, we'll be in a position to move forward with the resolution?
We've given our comments, so I think your balls in your court.
You want to answer that?
I can just say on our end, we have 2 of the approval letters. The county is 2 other locations, that shouldn't be a problem. The Hills Master Association is having their meeting the end of the month. So that's really the last one we're waiting for.
Okay.
For our site plan approvals.
Okay. So hopefully we're there. Okay, good. One of the other things that I discussed at the Somerset Hills Public Safety Committee meeting was the cannabis machine that was identified, or not identified, that was found at a gas station. And none of the other towns were aware of that situation. So I prized them all and asked them, you know, if they've all similarly have opted out of allowing dispensaries in their municipalities. And Tom, you just want to give a description of what this unit was?
It was essentially a cigarette type vending machine, but in the 21st century, like an iPad screen. And you had a scanner for your driver's license that shows you're over 21, and then you had a credit card input, and then you pick what you want. There was 6 options, and it would, as long as you were over 21 and your credit card didn't get declined, you could get your marijuana joint, your gummies.
Crazy. And so Bedminster PD did reach out to the Somerset County Prosecutor's Office, which said, hey, it's legal. We think this is a zoning issue. And since we are.
Yeah, it's not allowed under our zoning.
Yeah, it's not allowed under our zoning laws. The owner of the gas station was notified, who promptly arranged for its removal, which the owner of the machine took care of. But I think it does raise a question of, and I raised this to the Somerset Hills Public Safety Committee, to the other mayors, is I don't even know that that is legal, because when you are, my understanding is that when a dispensary is licensed, it's licensed at a particular location, and there are requirements for security and other elements that go with a dispensary. And also a dispensary comes with a license that costs a fair amount of money. So I'm a little suspect. And I don't know that it's right. Well, that I'm legally right, but it just seems suspect. It just seems suspect that you can just throw up a marijuana dispensing machine.
Vending machine.
It's a vending machine.
They redid.
Without going
They
through.
redid their entire gas station without.
Well,
Marijuana machine.
there you go. But it's just, you know, if we're seeing it at one location, I'm sure it's just a matter of time before we see it elsewhere. And I just want to make sure that the mayors were aware of that situation and so noted. So that was we'll leave that off with that old business. We'll go into township committee comments. We do have two resolutions to consider when we return from executive session. So we'll run through township committee comments. We'll adjourn to executive session. Then we will return to the public session for consideration of those two resolutions. So Robin, do you want us to go to the other room or should we stay here?
Well, I mean, if we're gonna go ahead and pause the meeting, I can.
But we're not gonna do it just yet. because
I
we still
can
have to
move
go through
everybody
committee
to the
comments.
chat room. Amanda's gonna stay with us, but Steve, Susan, and Catherine don't need to. I can move us into a separate room.
Okay, so we'll physically stay
Then
here.
move you into a chat room.
We'll ask the three of you just to head out, but not yet, not yet.
over yet.
Township committee comments.
I can't leave
You
now.
can. Lieutenant, take care of it.
Handcuffs.
So let's go through township committee comments. Committeeman Stevenson.
Thanks, Mayor. No comments.
Committeeman Hickman.
Mayor, thank you. Just want to thank our residents. One of the jobs up here is to amplify the concerns of our residents, but you got to show up. And they showed up tonight. They showed up in person. Thank you both for staying till the end. They showed up online. Had JCP&L showed up and there were two people here, they'd been like, I'm not going to really pay attention to this. Folks showed up. We're here to amplify your voices, but you got to participate. Thank you to our residents for participating. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Committeewoman Moreski.
I just like to reiterate what Colin said. It's great when our neighbors come out. I just hope that we can have a meeting with this many people for something wonderful and not something that's a problem. And that's all I got.
Okay, Committeewoman Fernandez.
No comments today.
Okay, and I have no further comments. So at 10:06, I'll take a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Gordon.
coming again.
Now you can go.
It might be done.
Good.
Okay.
It is 10:53. Township Committee is back from executive session and we do have, one resolution or do we have two?
Well, you have one
One.
resolution.
Just one, right?
Just one, the second you opted.
Yeah. So we have one resolution to consider, which is resolution number 2024-123.
Lacey Pennington.
This resolution authorizes the extension for the probation period of Officer Joshua Velez. Questions or comments from the Township Committee? Seeing none, take a motion to approve resolution 2024-123.
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote, please. Mr. Stevenson.
Aye.
Mr. Hickey.
Aye.
Ms. Moreski.
Aye.
Ms. Fernandez.
Aye.
And Mayor Jacobs.
Aye.
Thank you.
That's the only resolution that we are going to take action following our executive session. So at 10:54, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Go Falcons. They were up 15-9, which means they're gonna lose.
Right, so-
16.
16 to 15.
Yeah. Falcons. I'm a Falcon fan.